Chapter 1761. The two of them were teasing each other, and everything was so natural. It was as if before they broke up, this was how they got along with each other, snuggling up to each other. It turned out that even a normal conversation could be so warm. For this moment, both of them didn't know how long they had been waiting for. She remained in his arms, her face pressed against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. Occasionally, she would play with his fingers and squint her eyes slightly, like a cat under the sun, enjoying his caress. The darkness that once blocked her heart seemed to disappear bit by bit as they leaned against each other. In the depths of her heart, which had always been bleak, there was a little bit of sunlight penetrating. In fact, there were still some questions and grievances hidden in her heart, but she didn't want to ask or mention it at this time, so as not to break this rare peace. Supreme divinity, she didn't know what to think, but she used the honorific again. "What are you calling me?" Shunjili narrowed his eyes slightly. Anyone could call him supreme divinity, but she couldn't. If she called him that, his heart would hurt. Amo hugged his waist to comfort him, but still asked the biggest question in her heart. "Almighty, have you recovered your memories from 50,000 years ago? Did we really have an earth-shattering fight? Who won in the end?" Ever since she met him, this guy was high above and inviolable. Even when he was young in Mo Palace, his temperament was not to be underestimated. Although he never fought with her, she knew in her heart that if they really fought with all their strength, she was afraid that she wouldn't be his opponent. Maybe the her from 50,000 years ago could. If she recovered her memories from 50,000 years ago, would she also recover her skills from that time? How powerful was her skills at that time? Originally, she wasn't curious about her from 50,000 years ago, but now she was a little curious. Shunjuli's eyes deepened slightly, and he raised his hand to ruffle her hair. "We are evenly matched." These few words were so perfunctory. Imo didn't give up. Then who's the stronger one? "Shuama is the stronger one," Shunjuli answered without hesitation. He had been defeated by her for 3 lives, so naturally, she was the stronger one. Imo looked at him. Why did she feel that he was coaxing her? "Then what was my name then?" Imo settled for the next best thing. She only had the concept of a Mo from 50,000 years ago. She felt that it was impossible for a dignified devil master like her to have such a casual name. "Shuema," Shunjuli answered. Imo didn't react for a moment. "You were called Shuema at that time." She was wearing a dress that was as red as blood. She was also a demon, so she named herself Shuema. "So Shuema is my real name." Imo rubbed his forehead. "But why do I only remember calling myself Imo?" Shunjuli chuckled. Imo is the name you use when you want to do something bad. You want to create a sense of mystery. Imo raised an eyebrow at him. Why did she feel like he was trying to trick her? Alas, it seemed that she wouldn't be able to get much information from him. If she wanted to completely understand herself from tens of thousands of years ago, she had to recover her memories from tens of thousands of years ago. Because she had sealed her memories with a spell, she had forgotten whether she had memories from tens of thousands of years ago when she was reborn. If she wanted to solve this question, she had to undo her self-seal. Strange. This purple evil spirit only allowed her to recover her memories from her life as Ning Shuema, but it didn't allow her to recover her memories from the past. Chapter 1762. Should he unlock the seal and look at the memory from more than 50,000 years ago? It would take 2/3 of the time. It seemed that it was not worth it just to look at the memory. Mo's recovery speed was faster than Shunjuli expected. After only a little more than 15 minutes, her pale face had a hint of redness. When she spoke, she was getting stronger. At this speed, perhaps after half an hour, she would be able to escape without his help. However, in the current situation, would she escape alone? When the misunderstanding was not resolved, she was willing to follow him. Now that the misunderstanding was resolved, if she knew the truth, she would not leave. There was a high chance that he would die with him. If he was selfish, he would want her to accompany him even if he died. No matter where he went, he wanted her to accompany him. If possible, he would tie her to him. However, he cannot. All the sacrifices he had made were for the sake of letting her live a good life, a life that was free and at ease. Otherwise, why would he do all this? Moreover, they had a little Nienma. Nienma was still so young. He could not let him lose his parents. Otherwise, the little boy would cry to death. Thinking of his son's terrible crying skill, Shun Julie felt a little troubled. He looked at her in his arms. She was probably really tired. After talking for a while, she was so sleepy that her eyelids were drooping. However, she still tried to stay awake and chatted with him. Her little hand was holding his big hand. Their fingers were intertwined. She was holding his hand tightly. If his hand moved slightly, she would be aware. She was now the Devil Master. Her sixth sense was very sharp. He was now an arrow at the end of its flight. He was afraid that he would not be able to plot against her. When he let her in and treated her well, he already had the idea of erasing her memory again. He wanted to completely erase this part of her memory and erase the memory of her previous life. Then, when he really disappeared, she would not be in pain. She would not be in so much pain that she wanted to die. She would be able to live happily again. If he succeeded, she would fall asleep. He would take advantage of the time when she was unconscious to send her out of this dark underground and back to the surface. He believed that there would be someone waiting for her on the ground. When she woke up, this memory would disappear. She would only remember that she had sealed Zisha. At most, she would remember the promise of 1,000 years between them. Time was the best medicine to heal all wounds. Even if he did not return after 1,000 years, she could still accept it. Moreover, what he wanted her to remember was the hatred that could not be quelled. She kept talking to him, as if she wanted to say all the things she had been holding back for so long. He was also talkative and made all kinds of jokes with her. He kept hugging her very, very tightly, but he didn't do anything out of the ordinary. The most he did was kiss her forehead, the tip of her nose, her eyelashes. He never dared to touch her lips again. Shuama, are you sleepy? If you're sleepy, lean on me and rest. You'll recover faster if you sleep. He smiled and coaxed her. Shuama put her arms around his neck and looked into his eyes. Almighty, why don't you kiss me? Shun Julie was a little stiff. He sighed softly. You can't be too stimulated now. Before he finished his words, he was covered by her cold lips. This was the first time that she took the initiative to kiss him since they met. Chapter 1763. Shun Julie's body stiffened. His heart was beating like a drum. He wanted to push her away. Shuama, it won't be too exciting if I take the initiative. Almighty, kiss me. She whispered beside his lips. Then, her small mouth kissed him again. She used the tip of her tongue to push his lips open. She hugged and kissed him like a female overlord. There was a faint taste of blood in his mouth. It was the taste of blood that he couldn't swallow in time. She didn't feel it and only focused on kissing him. She used the tip of her tongue to pry open his teeth and dance with his tongue against his. It was a typical French kiss. She was the one who took the lead. She kissed him passionately and crazily, as if she could warm his cold lips and restore his vitality. After the kiss, she buried her head in his chest and panted slightly. Shuama, he called her with a trembling voice, as if he had sensed something. Her little face was buried in his chest, and he could feel the wetness slowly spreading from there. Was she crying? He raised his hand and wanted to do something, but he stopped when he felt the wetness. Idiot, why are you crying? He forced a smile. I'm happy. Her face was still on his chest, and her voice was a little muffled. Shun Julie let out a sigh of relief. He couldn't delay any longer. He raised his hand. Her hand groped over and held his hand tightly. Then, she pulled it in front of her. Almighty, I'm sleepy. Let me hold your hand and sleep. Okay, he replied, and let her hold his hand. How could he not like the feeling of their fingers intertwined? This was also the last time he would hold her hand. Naturally, he wanted to hold her hand for as long as possible. She was probably really tired. She fell asleep very quickly. However, her sleeping posture clearly showed that she didn't feel safe. Not only was she holding his hand with one hand, but her other hand was also holding his clothes tightly. He looked at her and stared at her without blinking. It was as if he wanted to engrave her appearance in his mind. A moment later, he closed his eyes slightly and raised his other hand, gently hovering above her head. A faint white light emitted and enveloped her. Shuama, I'm sorry. Forgive me for erasing your memories again. Forget about me. Forget about this. Then you can live a better life. You have to be happy, and I have to be happy as well. While he was casting the spell, she had been sleeping peacefully. He didn't know what kind of sad dream she had, but tears started to seep out of the corners of her eyes and roll down one by one. Julie wiped her tears with his trembling hands. This was the last time he would wipe her tears for her. There would never be a next time. In the future, no matter how much she cried, he would not be able to control her anymore. When mortals died, they would still have an afterlife to look forward to. However, he was a god. His death would truly cause his soul to scatter. He would truly disappear from this world and cease to exist. Shuamal, live on. Take our son and live a good life. His hand that was wiping away her tears gradually became transparent, and the talisman on his blue robe also began to flicker. He watched as his hand began to disappear inch by inch. It began to turn into a small stream of flowing light. Once this sign began, it would be very fast. His body was like an ice crystal, cracking and disappearing. After a moment, Julie's figure had already disappeared. The lotus bud suddenly broke and mixed with the flowing light that was originally rotating in the bud. This flowing light lifted Shuma up like a lover's embrace, enveloping her and flying out. Chapter 1764. Her tears fell drop by drop, but she never opened her eyes. She just slept peacefully and slept. Shuailon was wandering around outside like a madman. He was still looking for a passage to enter. Julie was Shuama's obsession, and she was his obsession. He wouldn't give up until he saw her come out or her corpse. Because the seal was successful, most of the people in the 6 realms left. There were also a few loyal subordinates of Mo Palace who didn't leave. They were with Shuailon and were searching around the mountain. Suddenly, a faint light flashed from the side of the mountain. Shuama's figure appeared out of thin air. A stream of light supported her as she made a small circle outside the mountain. Then, she landed on top of a mountain rock. Momo, Devil Master. Everyone saw her from different directions and rushed over. Shuailon ran at the front and rushed to her. When he saw her open her eyes, he stopped and said in a trembling voice, Momo. She was crying. Tears rolled down her cheeks like beads from a broken necklace. She slowly stood up and watched the stream of light that lifted her up circle around her 3 times before it spun away and flew into the clouds. A heavy rain fell. The heavy rain was like a heavenly river pouring down. Rushing downward, Shua knelt down in the rain without saying a word. Her hands dug into the grass beneath her. The rain washed her face. It was as if his hands were helping her wipe her tears again. The rain seemed to carry the cold fragrance of his sleeves. The sound of the rain seemed to be his reminders, reminding her to live well, to live on. Julie, we promised each other. 1,000 years. I'll wait for you for 1,000 years. I'll wait for you to come back. I'll take our son and wait for you to come back. As long as you come back, I won't hold it against you for wiping my memories again. Only when you come back can I be happy. Only then can my son and I be happy. Yes, her memories hadn't been wiped away. She was the Devil Master. Even when she was at her weakest, her senses were far sharper than normal people. When she was in his arms, she had already sensed that his body temperature was abnormal. His body temperature was dropping lower and lower. However, in order to not let her sense it, he was still desperately using spells to recover that little bit of body temperature. His heartbeat also slowed down, and then it stopped. That was the true 5 decay of heaven and man. No one could reverse the situation, not even her. At that time, she couldn't do anything for him. The only thing she could do was to not let him worry about her. She knew that he was worried about her. She knew that he wanted to wipe away her memories so that she could be happy. Thus, she fell asleep according to his wishes, giving him the opportunity to perform the final memory erasing technique on her. She didn't want him to leave, so she didn't open her eyes, but she couldn't control her tears. She didn't want him to. She wanted Momo. She was the Devil Master. As long as she was unwilling, no one could truly erase her memories. Shuailon stood beside her in a daze. looking at her crying. From beginning to end, she didn't make a sound, but her tears kept flowing down her face. Along with the continuous rain, it was as if the world was also crying with her. This kind of silent crying was the most heart-wrenching. The rain fell for 3 days and 3 nights. She knelt in the rain and cried for 3 days and 3 nights. No one could persuade her, and no one could really get close to her. They could only watch her cry. Chapter 1765. 3 days later, the rain finally stopped. A rainbow rose from the horizon, and the green hills were washed clean. The heavy rain washed away all the dirt of the mortal world and purified all the remaining purple evil in the world, leaving nothing behind. Shuema slowly stood up. Her knees seemed to be numb from kneeling, and she swayed as soon as she stood up. Momo, Shui Lan, who had been accompanying her in the rain, rushed over and wanted to support her. However, she stepped back a few steps like flowing water, and Shui Lan missed. He stood in place and looked up at her. Momo, there were no more tears on her face, as if she had cried all the tears in her life in the past 3 days. Her small face was plain and clean, but her eyes were clear as if they had been washed by water. It was a pair of ink-black eyes, and they were no longer red like gemstones. Standing there like this, she didn't look like the former Devil Lord, but like Ning Shuema in the past. This kind of her made Shui Ilan feel a little strange, especially the expression on her face. He stood there and didn't dare to go forward. He paused for a moment before asking, Momo, where is he? He also saw the flowing light that carried her up 3 days ago. He was a demon emperor, and he was experienced and knowledgeable, so he vaguely guessed something. He only asked this to confirm it from her mouth. Shuema didn't answer. She turned to look at the surrounding mountains and rivers. Divine power could create all things. Every blade of grass, every tree, every rock, and every mountain should have his breath. Tears wanted to come out again, but she held them back. He was gone, and there was no one to wipe her tears for her. She wouldn't cry again unless he came back. I will wait for him. Shuema smiled, but there seemed to be tears in her smile. But there was also an unshakable determination. It was only 1,000 years. She could afford to wait. Shuelan's heart finally sank. He turned to look at the surrounding scenery, as if trying to find that person from these sceneries. Although he knew that it would be cruel to ask, he still asked, what if he still doesn't come after 1,000 years? Then we'll wait for 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 5,000 years, until he returns. He can't bear to part with me. She looked up at the rainbow in the sky and smiled. Shun Julie, I know you can't bear to part with me, so you must come back. Shuema left with those loyal demon generals. When she left, her gaze finally turned to Shui Ilan. Then she smiled and said, Shui Ilan, I can treat you as a friend, a true friend. Her smile was pure, but her eyes were calm. When she looked at him, it was as if she was looking at a friend. Shui Ilan's heart ached, but he also smiled and only replied with one word, okay. He stood where he was and watched her figure slowly disappear into the air, but he no longer had the courage to chase after her. He knew that no matter how long he chased after her, he would never be able to catch up to her. She only had that person in her eyes. At most, he could only be considered as her friend. He could only be her friend. He stood there for a long time, not moving for a while. After a while, he smiled and said, Shun Julie, although you are dead, this king is still very envious of you. He looked up at the sky and couldn't help laughing. So I even envied a dead person. His laughter sounded like he was crying. His laughter echoed in the valley, startling countless birds. Suddenly, he seemed to sense something and suddenly turned around. His gaze fell on a woman who had just come out from behind a rock not far away. Chapter 1766. The woman was wearing a light red dress, looking elegant and refined. She calmly looked at him and calmly said, Do you want to have a drink? This woman was Fairy Ice Jade, who had worked with him before. He never thought that she would not go back with the other deities and would instead be waiting here. Shui Ilan's subordinates had already been sent away by him, so he was the only one here. Seeing Fairy Ice Jade suddenly appear, he felt a bit unhappy. Was this woman here just to see him make a fool of himself? His lips curled into a smile that could topple cities, but the words he said were vicious. Fairy, are you waiting here just to seduce this king? Fairy Ice Jade froze and raised her brows to look at him. What did you say? Chouette Elon slowly walked over and looked down at her. You willingly waited here in the heavy rain and appeared when this king was in dire straits. Is it because you think this king will be grateful to you and agree to drink with you? Fairy Ice Jade's face turned slightly pale. I just want to drink with your excellency. Shui Elon's smile became even more enchanting. Then what happens after we drink? He slightly moved closer to her. This king has heard of a phrase called messy sex after drinking. Do you want to have messy sex after drinking with this king? These words could be considered an insult. Fairy Ice Jade's face turned pale. She raised her hand to push his handsome face away. Shui Elon grabbed her hand and moved closer to her. He said in a soft voice, It's a pity that this king is not interested in you. Suddenly throwing her away, Fairy Ice Jade was thrown back a few steps. When she finally stood up, her face turned red. Shui Elon's figure floated and suddenly moved in front of her. Raising his hand, he grabbed her chin and looked in her eyes. Who do you think you are? Is the name Shui Elon something you can say? Ice Jade Fairy's pretty face turned green and white. Suddenly, a faint purple light flashed on her body. Shui Elon's finger trembled as if it was shocked by electricity. His finger loosened, but Ice Jade Fairy had already retreated a few steps like flowing water. Your Excellency thinks too much. Bingyu doesn't have any thoughts about Your Excellency. However, on account of our previous cooperation, I would like to invite Your Excellency for a drink. Since Your Excellency has no such intentions, Bingyu will not force Your Excellency. Goodbye. She turned around and flew away. Shui Elon stared blankly for a moment. Looking at his own hand, he seemed to have underestimated this woman. Her kung fu was much higher than what he had seen in the sealed land. She had hidden her true strength. Where did this woman come from? This thought flashed through his mind for a moment before he tossed it aside. No matter where that woman came from, it had nothing to do with him. As long as she didn't get in the way of him and Momo, he wouldn't care about her. He stood there for a moment and sighed softly. He really wanted to find someone to have a drink with. Shuamo returned to Mo Palace first. She went straight to the small courtyard where Shun Julie used to live to see the flower. Then, she stood at the entrance of the courtyard in a daze. The heavenly fire flower that used to be in the flower bed was no longer there. There were only a few messy, withered leaves in its original place. Himu! Himu! She called out. Manager Himu had been following behind her worriedly. When he heard her call, he hurriedly showed himself. Your subordinate is here. What about the flower? Himu, what about the flower? Her voice trembled slightly. Manager Himu looked at the flower bed in a daze. It was still fine a few days ago. Your subordinate doesn't know how it disappeared. Chapter 1767. Strange. Although the heavenly fire flower was rare, it didn't have any use. Who would steal it? Go and investigate. Shuama only gave this order, and Himu left as if his but was on fire. She slowly walked to the place where the heavenly fire flower used to grow. She slowly squatted down and paused for a moment. Then, she used her hands to dig at the soil. He treasured the flower so much that day. Perhaps it had some use, but she destroyed the entire area. Only one flower was left. Now that he was gone, was the flower also going to disappear? She came here directly, hoping to find some hope from the flower. She didn't expect that even this hope would be lost. She unwillingly dug at the ground with her hands, but she didn't find anything. Other than the few dried leaves on the ground, she couldn't find anything else related to the flower. She stood up with her hands full of mud and looked at the flower bed in a daze. She seemed to see him standing there, taking care of the flower, almighty. She reached out to hug him, but she hugged nothing. Illusion? It was just an illusion. She stood there like a fool for a moment. Then, she bent down to pick up a dried leaf. The leaf was so dried that there was no green at all. It was as if it had been baked by the scorching sun many times. She raised her hand and carefully touched the leaf. afraid that she would accidentally drop it. A leaf was a leaf, and it was a dried leaf. She closed her eyes slightly and carefully put the leaf into her storage space. She then studied the soil in the flower bed. The soil here was no different from other places. She could almost study all kinds of chemical composition, but she still couldn't find anything. However, the heavenly fire flower could only grow here. Perhaps there was a special reason for it. Julie should know, but it was a pity that he would never tell her personally. She stood up and looked around. The courtyard was empty. After Julie left, Butler Himu didn't let anyone else live here. It had been empty all this time. Too much time had passed, and she had thrown away everything related to him, so she couldn't smell any of his scent here. She walked into the house again. The house was also empty. She couldn't find anything related to him. She looked at her hands. She was so decisive at that time. It was unusually clean. Now, it was difficult for her to find anything that belonged to him in this house. She sat on the bed. This bed was not the one she had slept on before. It was just an ordinary wooden bed, and it was a little uncomfortable to sit on. She sat on the bed for a long time with her eyes lowered. No one knew what she was thinking. Or perhaps, until now, her mind was still in a mess, and she hadn't found a real clue. She knew that she should go to Fantion Palace to see her son, but she didn't know how to face him. Furthermore, her mental state was extremely weak right now. Her eyes were extremely dry, her head was extremely painful, and her heart was extremely stuffy. After all, her heart meridian had just been broken. Just moving a little more would cause her heart to hurt. It hurt so much that it felt like it was going to break again. She couldn't let it break, and she didn't want to die. His wish was for her to live well. How could she not comply with his wish? Therefore, no matter how difficult it was, she would try to survive. She had to adjust her mentality before meeting her son. Otherwise, he would be even sadder to see her like this. Chapter 1768. She didn't need to look in the mirror to know that she was as pale as a ghost. She waved her sleeves, and a set of bedding appeared on the bed. It was exactly the same as the one Julie had used before. Yes, although she was disgusted at that time and wanted to chase him away, she had only been here once, but strangely, she remembered all the decorations in his room, including the color of the bedding. Now, she made a new set of bedding and crawled into the bed. She hugged the bedding tightly and fell asleep in a daze. She didn't know how long she slept. When she woke up again, it was already a day later. She stretched her arms and legs and sat up on the bed. Then, she looked out of the window in a daze. This room was really too small. It wasn't even 1/3 the size of her bedroom. Naturally, it couldn't be compared to his bedroom in the Sun Moon sect. The room was narrow and small. It must have been hard for someone like him to be cooped up in such a small space for more than a month without any complaints. There were many things that she couldn't think about in the past. Whenever she thought about it, her heart would hurt as if it was being torn apart. She hugged the bedding and thought, why didn't I treat him a little better back then? Even if it was just a little bit. The bedding didn't have his scent. Even if she hugged it, her heart would still feel empty. She lowered her head and thought for a while. In the end, she didn't give up and carefully searched the room for a long time. Her efforts paid off. She finally found something related to him. It was a small piece of cloth with a drop of blood on it. It should have been left behind when he was injured. She found it in a crack in the room. She felt as if she had found a treasure. She gently held the piece of cloth that was no bigger than a fingernail in her palm. There was a little bit of a scent on it, but it was just a little bit. She held the piece of cloth in her palm for a long time. Then, she put it in her storage space. Shuamal felt that she was probably suffering from hysteria. She wandered around the Mo palace like a wandering ghost for an entire day. She went to all the places he had been before, searching for anything related to him, as if she was searching for treasures. Unfortunately, she was too heartless at that time. After breaking off the engagement with him, in order to cut off all his thoughts, she destroyed or threw away everything that belonged to him. Now, it was very difficult to find them even if she wanted to. However, he had lived here for more than a month after all. If she looked carefully, she could still find some clues, such as the cup he used to drink from, the vase he used to put in, and even the dried flowers he gave her that she casually threw into the trash kin, those things were small and insignificant, and most of them no longer had the aura he once left behind. However, as long as he had touched them, she could not help but collect them. When he gave her flowers, she had never seen them before. She had no idea what kind of flowers they were. At that time, he sent her flowers every day. She only thought that it was a way for him to pick up girls. Now that she thought about it, he was so persistent in sending her flowers. Perhaps he had a purpose. These flowers might have some special meaning. Because too much time had passed, the flowers that were once thrown into the trash can no longer exist. She summoned manager Himu and asked him where the trash was dumped. Then, she went straight there. After rummaging through the trash, she finally found some flowers. Of course, flowers were delicate things. After being thrown into the trash for so long, most of them had already rotted away. She searched for a long time and only found a few petals or a single branch. She could barely see their original appearance. She studied each one for a while, but still couldn't find anything. Chapter 1769. She pondered for a moment and turned to ask Himu, who had been following beside her, who is the one who knows these flowers the best in the 6 realms. Himu was very knowledgeable, so he immediately answered, Mother Earth. Shuama did not know much about the people in this world, so naturally, she did not know who Mother Earth was. She casually ordered, Go and summon Mother Earth. I want to ask her something. Manager Himu was in a dilemma. Devil Master, Mother Earth does not belong to the 6 realms. She does not listen to anyone. She cannot leave the land. If you want to see her, you have to find her yourself. The place where Mother Earth lived was a little special. It was deep underground. To find her, one had to use the Earth escape technique to drill dozens of miles into the soil. In the middle, one had to pass through several layers of rock and magma. It was very difficult. Even with Yi Tianli's high level of kung fu, he would have to put in a lot of effort to enter her underground palace. He would have to shed a layer of skin just to find her. Although Shuama's kung fu was much higher than Yi Tianli's, she had just reconnected her heart. If she went there now, she would probably lose her life. Her life was exchanged for by Shan Jiuli. It was very precious. She could not lose it, or else she would be sorry to him. Shuama placed the flowers, branches, leaves, and leaves into her storage space. She planned to rest for a while before going to look for Mother Earth. Now, she should go and see her son. When Shun Yinma was forced to return to Fantian Palace by his father, he still had a lot of resentment in his heart. He had promised to give him a month's leave, but it was canceled because he and his mother went on an adventure. It was canceled. Not only that, his father also gave him a lot of homework. The names of those homework assignments were relayed to him by Zhe, the divine beast that guarded him. One by one, he said that if he didn't read and learn them well, he wouldn't be allowed to leave Fantian Palace. Shin Yinma was a smart child, but it would be difficult for him to memorize more than 1,000 books with more than 100,000 words. When Shin Yinma saw the books, he only felt that his head was buzzing. He wanted to bargain with his father, but the only directed audio spell that his father left for him had automatically burned. He could not contact his father for the time being. She was planning to bargain with her father when he returned so that he could not torture children like this. This kind of force-feeding education was not right. It was not conducive to the healthy growth of children. After he returned to Fantian Palace, he flipped through the books. Most of them were written by his father. He didn't know when his father had written them. Shin Yinma was very annoyed when he saw the books in the room. To express his dissatisfaction, he deliberately picked out a few books that were written by his father and threw them on the ground. He left a bunch of small footprints on the books to represent his anger. Then, he ran out of the study room to play with the mythological beasts. He had a lot of fun that day, and it was the first time that he was allowed to play like this. He felt very happy, but at the same time, he was also a little worried. His mother had already contacted him and said that it was very safe, so he didn't have to worry. At that time, he was indeed relieved, but after playing for half a day, he thought of his mother again. When he tried to contact her again, he couldn't get in touch with her. The voice transmission talisman remained motionless, as if it was dead. This made him feel a little uneasy, but he did not take it to heart. Thanks to his father's force-feeding education, he knew that the voice transmission talisman did not work in some forbidden places. That place was very strange. His father and mother must have joined hands to explore that place, so it was not strange that they could not get in touch. Chapter 1770. Moreover, his father and mother were the strongest people in the world. With the two of them working together, what difficulties could they not overcome? Walls could be difficult for them. After playing for a whole day, he still did not see his father come back until the sky was completely dark. He tried to contact his mother again, but he still could not reach her. However, he began to panic as if he was about to lose the most important thing. It was a strange feeling. He did not know anything, but he began to feel sad and inexplicably wanted to cry. The 8 mythological beasts who stayed with him had their own duties. One of them could even cook. Among them, Tangxi was a master of cooking. Therefore, although Shen Yinma stayed alone in the Fantian Palace, he did not starve. Although the food cooked by Tangxi was not as good as his father's, it was still acceptable. Although Shen Yinma had been used to sleeping alone these days, he knew that his father was in the palace and was not far away from him. However, this time, after dinner, he played for a while. When his father did not come back, he began to feel uneasy. He tried to contact his mother again, but failed. He could not help but want to run out of the palace to have a look. However, the distance between the Fantian Palace and the mortal realm was not ordinary. When he came back, the 8 mythological beasts were there to pick him up, but it took nearly a day. If he wanted to go there again, he was afraid that he would not be able to reach it in a short time. Moreover, his father had told him that he could not leave the Fantian Palace until he had memorized the books and really mastered them. The 8 mythological beasts were his guards and also to monitor him. He could not leave the Fantian Palace for a while. He had no choice but to climb in a bed and sleep. In his half-awake state, he seemed to see his father standing in front of his bed and looking at him. He was shocked. In his dream, he still remembered that he had not done his homework and thought that his father was there to punish him. Therefore, he decided to take the initiative. He pouted and looked as if he was about to cry. "Father, why are you only back now? I am afraid to be alone in the palace. Where is my mother? Is she okay now? What is the purple smoke? It can make animals crazy. Have you gotten rid of it?" He asked a series of questions in one breath. He thought that his father would at least answer him, but he did not expect that his father's figure began to gradually disappear. He jumped in fright and pounced forward, but he pounced on empty air. His body felt cold, and he woke up. His little heart was beating wildly. This was the first time he had dreamed of such a father. He didn't know why, but he broke out in a cold sweat. Her eyes stung, and she had the urge to cry out loud. Before he could come back to his senses, the Fantian Palace suddenly started raining heavily, and the sound of the rain was like the world was sobbing. He lay on the bed in a daze for a long time before running out barefoot. He went straight to his father's bedroom and banged on the door with all his might. "Father! Father!" The door of the bedroom was tightly shut. It was unusually cold, and there was no sign of it opening. His whole body was drenched, but he did not care and screamed desperately, "Father, please open the door. I am scared." Nyima was scared. "You're back, right?" He shouted over and over again until his throat was hoarse, but not a single person came out. Originally, in order to train his courage, his father would not open the door for him at night, no matter how much he cried. Now it was the same. He scratched the door for a long time and suddenly found a problem. Originally, the door of the bedroom was always covered with a thin wizardry barrier, regardless of whether his father was there or not. As long as his father did not want to open the door for him, it was useless no matter how hard he scratched. However, the wizardry barrier was no longer there. Chapter 1771. As long as his father did not open the door for him, it would be useless no matter how hard he scratched. However, the wizardry barrier was no longer there. There was only a lock hanging on the door. "Father!" Shinyama stared at the lock for a moment. He was disappointed. His father had not returned yet. Otherwise, he would not have hung a lock outside. In the end, he did not give up. He jumped up and took off the lock. Then, He pushed the door with all his might. The door creaked open. Shin Yinma's heart was beating fast. He had not been to his father's bedroom for a long time. Usually, his father would see him in the study room or the living room. He pushed the door open and walked in. The room was quiet. There was no one in the room. The bedding on the bed was neat and clean. The layout of the room had completely changed. The jade screen and the antique shelf were gone. Instead, there were rows of cabinets. In the cabinets, there were neatly arranged bottles of different sizes. Medicine bottles. Shin Yinma recognized a few of them. They were similar to the Golden Sword medicine. He was naughty and playful, so he often bumped into things. It was normal for him to get bruised. Sometimes when he bumped into things badly, his father would apply some of the ointment on him. It was very effective and almost relieved the pain. Usually, his father would put these things in his storage space. Why were they all here this time? There were so many of them. Moreover, each bottle was labeled with a name and a simple description of the effect. That tag was also in his father's handwriting. It was a beautiful and flamboyant handwriting, just like his father. Shin Yinma looked at the rows of medicine bottles in a daze. The bad feeling in his heart was getting stronger. He unconsciously walked around the room and felt that there was something missing, but he couldn't remember what it was at the moment. After thinking for a while, he rushed out again. Although he was young, he was a real genius. In addition, Shun Jili taught him well. Therefore, Shun Yinma could already set up a wizardry barrier at a young age. Although it was raining heavily outside, if he did not want to get wet, he could still set up a wizardry barrier to avoid the rain. However, he was too anxious at this time. He did not care about the rain and ran back to his bedroom. She hurriedly opened her wardrobe and was stunned. Inside his wardrobe was a small storage space. At this moment, there were rows of his clothes, underwear, outerwear, training clothes. There were hundreds of them. In the future, he could wear whatever he wanted to wear, as many as he wanted to wear. Shin Yinma always had a bad habit. He was unwilling to wash his dirty clothes. He often wanted to throw them to his father, saying that he was still young. It was enough for his father to not let him carry and comfort him. Therefore, his father should wash his clothes for him. Anyway, it was just a matter of a cleaning spell. However, in order to train his self-care ability, his father never washed his clothes. He even prepared very few clothes for him, only 3 sets of clothes. If he wore one set, he had to wash it himself. If he didn't know the cleansing spell, he had to wash it by the lake. Shun Yinma was also angry. He said that he did not want to wash his clothes, but he did not wash them. He deliberately walked in front of his father like a dirty monkey. As a result, he was thrown out by his father into various mud pits, which made him roll on the ground like a mud monkey. Shin Yinma could not stand being so dirty, so he had to wash his clothes with resentment. Of course, he was very active in practicing the cleansing spell. Chapter 1772. Now that he had almost practiced the cleansing spell, although he might not be able to make it as spotless as his father, he could still remove the obvious stains. Why did his father suddenly prepare so many clothes for him? He ran over to take a look. There was even a natural silk robe that he desperately wanted at that time. In the cupboard under his clothes, there were some new toys that he liked to play with. However, his father did not let him play with them. These toys were strange. There were wooden birds that could fly, slingshots, guns. There were also some that he could not name. They were all placed in the cupboard as if waiting for the young master to play with them. Shin Yinma was stunned. He did not see these things before he went to bed. He clearly remembered that he had changed his clothes after he came back from the other continent. At that time, the cupboard was still normal. How could there be so many new things after he woke up? Was his father back? He secretly left something for him, and then left? Father! 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 Shun Yinma rushed out of the door and began to wander around the Fantion Palace to look for his father. He shouted while looking for him. The 8 mythological beasts were all attracted by his shouting. Shun Yinma naturally asked if they had seen his father. Unexpectedly, the 8 mythological beasts shook their heads. No, little master, the Divine Lord did not come back. Yes, little master, if the Divine Lord came back, we would be the first to know. Little master, don't shout. The divine lord did not come back. The 8 mythological beasts tried to persuade him. Shinyeon naturally did not listen. If his father did not come back, then what was going on in his cupboard? His father must have come back. He ran wildly in the heavy rain for the whole night and went everywhere. However, he still could not find any trace of his father. He stood in the courtyard with his whole body wet. The fear in his heart was overwhelming, but he did not dare to cry out loud. It seemed that if he cried out, the things that he did not dare to think about in his heart would become a reality. He was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, an idea came to his mind. His father did not come out now. Perhaps it was to punish him for not studying. He desperately tried to find a reason for his father not to appear, then ran back to the study. The book he threw on the floor was still there, and there were even a few pages with his small footprints on them. He quickly picked them up and stacked them neatly. He even washed his hands to freshen himself up. Then he spoke to the void. "Father, Myanmar is obedient now. I'm going to study now. You can come out now. I will study hard and practice hard so that my father will not worry about me anymore." It was quiet all around. Naturally, his father did not come out. "Father? Come out." Myanmar's cleaning skill had improved again. "If you don't believe me, you can come out and take a look. Myanmar's clothes were wet just now, but now I can dry them in the blink of an eye. You can come out and check on him." Shun Myanmar racked his brains to think of a way to force his father to show up. However, he thought of no less than a dozen possibilities, but there was still no movement. He had been running in the heavy rain for the entire night, so he felt a little dizzy at the moment. He touched his head and pursed his lips. "Father, Myanmar has a fever. I'm sick." He plopped down on the carpet and panted a few times with a red face. "Father, Myanmar is very uncomfortable. Father, come out and give me a hug." The wind blew in from the window, making the curtains dance. It also blew on Shun Myanmar's body. Chapter 1773. The wind blew in from the window and made the curtains dance. It also blew on Shun Myanmar's body. He shuddered and looked around anxiously. Although his kung fu was good, he was still only 2 or 3 years old. He was also very cute, so he looked very cute when he was lying there. It made people want to kiss and hug him. This was his trump card. When he was too naughty and caused his father to be unhappy and ignore him, he would use this move to prevent his father from punishing him. His father would often lose his cool and come to see him, touch his forehead, or even pick him up and pat him in his arms. His father's medical skills were amazing. Naturally, he would quickly find out that he was pretending to be sick. Therefore, he would often punish him even more severely. For example, he would punish him to run 10 laps around the Fantian Palace. When he found out that he was lying, he would make him run 20 or 30 laps. Shin Yinma was so punished that he would cry for his father and mother. He did not dare to use this trick to tease his father. He did not know if his father had seen through his little trick or he really did not come back. After waiting for a long time, he still did not get a hug from his father. He pursed his lips and cried, "Father, it's true this time. Myanmar is sick. Father, come out and hug me." He lay on the ground and cried until his voice was hoarse. In the end, he even threatened, "Father, if you don't come out, I will cry myself to death here. If you come out, I will not cry. If you come out, I will be willing to run 30 laps." Of course, his father did not come out. He would never come out again. He did have a fever. The more he cried, the heavier his head became. He cried and cried until he fell asleep. He really had a fever. The fever made him dizzy. When he woke up, he called his father and said that he was not lying. He opened his little hands and waited for his father to hug him. Originally, the 8 mythological beasts were not allowed to enter the study. However, Shun Yinma cried for too long and did not come out to eat. The 8 mythological beasts called him from outside, but he did not respond. In the end, the 8 mythological beasts had no choice but to let Bai Zhe, who was more sensitive, in to see how the young master was doing. As soon as Bai Zhe went in, he saw Shun Yinma lying on the ground with a red face. He was shocked and quickly carried him. His small body was burning like charcoal, causing Bai Zhe to tremble. The 8 mythical beasts could transform into anything. In fact, all of them had the ability to transform into humans. However, Unless it was absolutely necessary, the supreme divinity would not allow them to transform into humans. Moreover, these mythological beasts also believed that their original forms were the most beautiful and were unwilling to appear in other forms. Therefore, they usually stayed in their original form when they were with Shun Yinma. It was not easy for them to carry a baby in their beast form, so Baizé had no choice but to transform into a human. Baizé's human form was extremely beautiful. His white robe was elegant and charming, and he looked very scholarly. Shin Yinma opened his eyes in a daze and saw a white robe. He immediately grabbed it tightly. "Father, father, you finally appeared." Baizé was scared out of his wits. He did not dare to pretend to be a divine lord, so he quickly explained, "Little master, I'm Baizé, not a divine lord." However, Shun Yinma was already in a daze due to the fever. He still refused to let go of his father. "Father, Yinma is sick. Don't leave me." Baizé had no choice but to carry him out and try to reduce his fever. Fortunately, before the supreme divinity left the Fantion Palace, she had given Baizé some medicine. It was mainly used to treat children's illnesses. Chapter 1774. Baizé had to admit that the Divine Lord's medicine was very effective. Not long after Baizé fed him the medicine, his fever gradually subsided. Shun Yinma woke up and looked at Baizé, who was guarding his bed. He could not stop crying. He was so sick this time, but his father still did not appear. His father was so cruel. Shun Yinma was very frustrated. He had used all kinds of tricks to force his father out, but he still could not force his father to come out. He had been lying on the bed for a long time. He did not want to eat or drink anything. Baizé did not dare to force him. It had to ask the flying serpent, who was good at cooking, to make a lot of delicious food. It wanted to let this grumpy little brat have a good meal. However, Shun Yinma was determined this time. He pursed his lips tightly and said that he would not eat. He wanted to force Shanjuli to come out by going on a hunger strike. He would be happy even if his father came out and gave him a good spanking. In just 3 days, the little guy was very sick. He had the physique of a demigod, so it was not a big deal even if he did not eat or drink. However, he was still a child after all. He was usually a little foodie, so he could cry if he did not eat. Therefore, when he did not eat for 3 days, the 8 mythological beasts were very anxious. They were worried that something bad would happen to him due to hunger. Just when he was feeling helpless, there was a movement at the gate of the palace. It seemed that someone had come in. The gate of the Fantion Palace was usually closed to the outside, so outsiders could not come in. Who was it that came in at this time? Shin Yinma, who was lying on the bed and looked like he was about to die, suddenly jumped up and ran out. "Father." Shuama had just opened the gate of the Fantion Palace and walked in when she saw Shun Yinma rushing over like a small cannonball. "Father." However, when he saw who it was, he was stunned for a moment. However, he quickly rushed over. "Mother." Shuama's footsteps paused, and her heart suddenly twisted. She tightly held him in her arms. After not seeing him for 3 days, the little guy had lost a lot of weight. His eye sockets were sunken in, and his originally tender and delicate skin had become somewhat pale and shriveled. She subconsciously felt the little fellow's pulse. "Are you sick?" After waiting for 3 days, Shun Yinma finally found a family member. Naturally, he would not let go of her. He pressed his face against Shuama's face and pouted as if he was about to cry. "I was drenched and fell sick. Why didn't father come out to see Yinma?" Shuama hugged him tightly. His unintentional words were like a knife stirring in Shuama's heart. She kissed her son. "Come, mother will take a look at you." She carried him and walked inside. Shin Yinma's eyes were looking behind her, as if he was trying to find someone else. "Mother, where is father? You didn't come back together." Shuama paused for a moment. "Your father is injured. He's recuperating in seclusion. He won't be back for the time being." In the end, she still couldn't bear to tell her son about Shun Juli's actual situation. The child was still too young. It would be too cruel to tell him such an outcome. Moreover, she didn't believe that Shun Juli would really disappear. She had died twice, and even her soul was scattered once. Didn't she come back in one piece? Perhaps Shunjili was the same. This time, it might be a trial for him. His soul was scattered here, and perhaps he was reborn somewhere else. Perhaps he was now looking for the way to the celestial devil continent. He would come back. It was just a matter of time. Didn't he say that it would be 1,000 years? Although he had erased her memory a few times, he had never lied to her. It must be the same this time. Since he said that he would come back after 1,000 years, he would definitely come back. Chapter 1775. Shinjuli, you have to come back. You can't break your promise to me and my daughter. Shunichin's promise was worth a lot of money, wasn't it? However, Shun Yima was not as gullible as other children. He widened his eyes and asked, "Father is injured? Is it serious? Where is he?" Shuima put him on the bed and rubbed his head. "It is a little serious, so he needs to be isolated. As for the location of his seclusion, your father has never told anyone about it. Don't worry, Nyinma. When he recovers, he will come back to see you." Shin Yinma blinked his eyes and still did not give up. Where else is better than the Fanteon Palace? It is full of spiritual power and quiet. No one will disturb him. Is father afraid that Nyinma will disturb him? Is that why he won't come back? Nyinma will be good and will not disturb him. Mother, I miss father. Can you ask him to come back? She felt as if there were countless needles pricking her heart, but she could not show it in front of her son. Shuima kissed her son's little face. Good boy, Nyinma. Get well first. She was also a doctor. When she felt her son's pulse, she knew that he had caught a cold. She was good at treating this. She was busy with the child. She was now the child's mother. She could not afford to be sad and dispirited. No matter how painful it was, she could only cry in a quiet place. She could not be weak in front of her child. After all, Shun Yima was still a child. When his parents were not around, he would feel lonely and afraid. Now that his mother was back by his side, his heart finally calmed down a little. He held Shuima's arm and asked, "Mother, father came back 3 days ago and brought so many clothes and toys for Nyinma, but he did not see Nyinma." Shuima's arms stiffened slightly, and her heart suddenly jumped. 3 days ago, Shinjili had just passed away. Did he come back? Your father has always loved you. What clothes and toys did he send you? Shin Yinma told her about his wardrobe. Shuima did not speak. She slowly walked to the wardrobe and opened it. She looked at the small clothes and played with them for a moment. Shin Yinma might not understand, but Gu Shijio did. These things were prepared by Shanjili a long time ago. However, he set up a small wizardry barrier here. When he was alive, with the wizardry barrier, Shun Yinma would not be able to find the things in the wizardry barrier. Once he died, all the barriers he had set up would disappear, and the child would naturally be able to see them. It seemed that he had prepared everything in advance. Strange, the eruption of Zisha also happened suddenly. Could he have predicted it in advance? Did she foresee where he would immortalize? She knew that Shun Jioli's fortune-telling ability was extremely powerful. In her previous life, he had never made a mistake in his fortune-telling. However, didn't he also say that fortune-tellers shouldn't tell their own fortunes? Not only was he unable to divine his own future, he was also unable to divine hers. How could he have predicted this in advance? She thought of Shun Juli's many strange behaviors when he was sealing Zisha, such as the first time he wore such a robe, his indifference to her, and his distance from her. It was as if he had predicted the outcome in advance and reacted accordingly. When he first came to the celestial devil continent, he still wanted to pursue her again. He did not hesitate to lower himself to live in her small courtyard and send her flowers every day regardless of rain or shine. She tried always to force him to break off the engagement and even used the method of marrying a concubine to make things difficult for him. Chapter 1776. She tried her best to force him to break off the engagement. She even tried to make things difficult for him by making him a concubine. When he agreed to break off the engagement at that time, it was more like a retreat in order to advance. Otherwise, he would not have tried so hard to persuade her to come to the Fanteon Palace after his identity as the Divine Lord was exposed. Of course, he was not really cold to her. The real coldness seemed to have begun when he returned to the Fanteon Palace. Could it be that he had recovered some of his memories in the Fanteon Palace? Did he know that he would not live for long? Was that why he was cold to her? Perhaps there were some secrets hidden in the Fanteon Palace. Xiu Ma had always been a very calm person. Previously, Shun Julie's disappearance made her panic. Now, as time went by, she slowly calmed down and tried to analyze it seriously. Mother, did father come back? Little Nianma looked at his mother, who was lost in thought. Xiu Ma secretly took a breath and turned around. Yes, your father came back. He will be in isolation for a long time. He is worried about you, so he brought you these things. Nianma, you must be good. Don't let your father down. Look at your little face. Come, eat something and sleep. Little Nianma finally breathed a sigh of relief. He had been tossing and turning these past few days and was indeed tired. Now that his mother was by his side watching over him, his heart had some support. What's more, he had also received news from his father. His little heart that had been on edge for a long time finally relaxed a little. Sure enough, after eating some things, he fell asleep. After settling him down, Xiu Ma sat in front of his bed for a while and then walked out. After thinking about it, she went directly to Shun Julie's bedroom. This was the first time she entered his bedroom in the Fanteon Palace. The layout was quite similar to his bedroom on the Lotus Hill. Even the appearance of the bed was similar. It was a lotus white jade bed. The clean bedding, the clean room, the familiar environment, and the lingering familiar smell made Xiu Ma's eyes slightly dry. There seemed to be something surging in her chest. Her throat was blocked, but she did not cry. She had already shed all her tears in those 3 days. Now, no matter how sad she was, she couldn't shed a single tear. Her gaze landed on the rows of medicine bottles. She recognized most of them, some of which she had even obtained before. These were all things from Shun Julie's storage space. At that time, no matter what kind of injury or strange illness she suffered from, he would conjure the right medicine for her to take and apply it for her. Some of the commonly used small bottles could be felt with her eyes closed. She remembered that when she asked him out of curiosity how much medicine he had on him and how many good things he had on him, he would rub her hair and say, "Take a guess." Now, she didn't have to guess anymore, because all the medicines were placed here. There were more than 1,000 kinds, and it was a dazzling array. There was even an alchemy cauldron in the corner. It looked ancient and full of charm. There were 2 books beside the cauldron. He took the 2 books and took a look. The books recorded all kinds of alchemy rules, and they were extremely detailed and comprehensive. The words on the books were also his handwriting. It was so familiar that it seemed to be carved into her heart with a knife. There was no need to ask. These alchemy rules were left for her by him. Looking at the ink, it was also new, less than a month old. She held the 2 books and slightly closed her eyes. Shun Julie, you've really prepared everything for your funeral. Monday roll tickets. Chapter 1777. Shun Julie, you've really prepared everything for your funeral, just like your usual strict temperament. However, why didn't you tell me if you had already anticipated this? If I had known that sealing the egg would cost your life, I would have joined hands with you from the beginning. No matter how difficult it was for you, I would have stuck by your side. If that was the case, would the final outcome be different? A person would be particularly strong after having child. If it were not for little Nianma, she might have been so dispirited that she did not even want to live anymore. However, with little Nianma by her side, for the sake of the child, she had to hold on no matter how bitter her heart was. She had been rushing for the past few days. At the moment, she was exhausted. However, she looked at the big bed and pursed her lips. She did not want to lie on it. Shun Julie, I will wait for you to come back and give me a status. I have been entangled with you for so long, and we even have a child together. However, you have never sincerely said that you would marry me. If you don't come back, I will not sleep in your room or your bed. She turned and left his bedroom. She walked around nearby and tidied up a side chamber. She casually made a bed and lay on it. She wanted to rest first. Initially, she wanted to take a nap on the bed. However, she did not expect to fall asleep so sweetly. In a trance, she seemed to have a bunch of messy dreams. There were countless scenes in the dream. In the dream, she climbed out of an egg. Her legs were weak, and she could not stand steadily. Her heart was full of hunger. She could not wait to bite her own eggshell. Out of nowhere, a hungry wolf appeared and bared its fangs to bite her. She was born with a kind of strength, so she did not know how to be afraid. When the wolf pounced on her, she threw herself on the wolf and directly tore its neck with her small hands. She leaned on its neck and drank its blood. The hungry wolf was drunk in the blink of an eye. She wiped her mouth and got up. It seemed that she was still hungry. She instinctively looked for food. Rabbits, bears, tigers, deer. She ate whatever she caught along the way. Of course, she only drank the blood and did not eat the meat. As she drank more and more blood, her mobility became stronger and her running speed became faster and faster. The animals in the forest were no match for her at all. Perhaps it was because of her natural hostility. The wolves, insects, tigers, and leopards all ran away when she passed by, not daring to meet her face to face. At that time, she had just drunk the blood of a fat wild boar and felt a little bloated, so she lay on a big tree and basked in the moonlight. Inadvertently, he saw an elephant in the distance, followed by a baby elephant. The baby elephant stretched out its small nose to drink milk from under the mother elephant from time to time, and the mother elephant patted it with her long nose. The scene looked very warm. She lowered her head and looked at herself. She was all alone, and no one came to care for her. For the first time, her little heart was not troubled by hunger. For the first time, she longed for something other than blood. For example, the desire to be caressed, the desire to be embraced. Of course, this desire didn't last long in her heart, because she was hungry again. She seemed to have a strong digestive ability. If she did not drink blood for half a day, she would be starving. However, she could not find anything to eat later on. After enduring for a day, she was so hungry that she was dizzy. When the poisonous sun shone on her, she was a little dazed. While she was lying on a big rock in a half-conscious state, she heard the sound of a zither. Although she was ignorant at that time, she could still listen to the sound of nature and was intoxicated. For the first time in her life, she felt that the forest was very pleasing to the eye. The poisonous sun above her was also very beautiful. Chapter 1778. For the first time in her life, she felt that the forest was very pleasing to the eye. The poisonous sun above her head was also very beautiful. She ran towards the sound of the zither and found a very pleasing-looking man in white sitting on top of a tall mountain rock. There was a zither on his lap, and the wonderful sound of the zither was coming from there. What made her even happier was that there were a lot of animals here. They were all around the big rock, shaking their heads and wagging their tails as they listened to the zither music. Thus, she unceremoniously pounced over. While pouncing on a deer, she lay on its body and sucked its blood, while perking up her small ears to listen to him play the zither. Just as she drank a few mouthfuls of the sweet blood, the zither music suddenly stopped. She looked up in surprise. Before she could see the person's movements, her small body flew up. After she crawled out of the eggshell, she had been running around the forest looking for food. She did not take a bath and did not wear any clothes. At that time, she was still in a confused state and thought that she was an animal. Which animal wore clothes? When her small body flew into the air, there was a flash of white light on her body, and the mud on her body disappeared. When she fell into the man's arms, there was an extra set of clothes on her body. There was a delicate fragrance on the man's body. It smelled very good. She leaned on his body and smelled it. Of course, she did not feel comfortable with the extra clothes on her body, so she stretched out her small hands to tear them off. Although she was small, she was very strong. The sturdy cloth was torn by her in the blink of an eye, and she became a naked doll again. Her arms and legs were free again, and her attention returned to him. The smell on his body was too good. She could not help but hold his hand and want to bite it. But he pinched her small mouth, and she could not bite it. He stared at her ruby-like eyes and frowned slightly. Demon. It was the first time she heard a human voice, so she followed his voice and said the first word, Demon. He smiled slightly, and his eyelashes curved slightly. She felt that his smile was very beautiful, so she also smiled, and her eyelashes also curved. After laughing, She wanted to bite his hand. There is actually such a pure demon. Your pair of eyes are very beautiful. He raised his hand and stroked her head, smoothing out her messy hair. When she was born, her hair was very long. In just a few days, it had grown long, almost reaching her ankles. Using his hand as a pair of scissors, he trimmed her hair. The front of her hair was neat, covering her full forehead, revealing only a pair of ruby-like eyes. "Who are your parents?" he asked, his voice as melodious as a cello. She did not understand what he was saying. She was very obsessed with his blood and still tried to bite his hand, wanting to suck his blood, his hand pressed on her back, and she didn't know what he was probing. Then, he looked at her with some surprise in his eyes. "You're actually a natural-born devil." His fingertips emitted a white light, as if he wanted to do something to her. She felt that the white light was very beautiful, so she smiled at him with curved eyelashes, revealing a pair of small canine teeth and a pair of small dimples. The man's finger paused, and he looked at her with a complicated gaze. A moment later, the white light on his finger disappeared, and he sighed. "Since the heavens gave birth to you, there must be a reason. You're so cute, so you can't do much evil." He looked down at her, and she also looked up at him. Her big eyes blinked, and they were incomparably pure. There seemed to be a faint smile in his eyes. "Little fellow, you probably don't have a name. Why don't I give you a name?" Chapter 1779. She didn't understand, so her eyes were still staring at his finger. She curled her lips and said, "Hungry blood." This was the word she would say when she was born. "Blood demon?" The man looked at her bright red lips. "Shwa, emo," she repeated with her tongue stuck out. His eyes flashed slightly. "Then let's call you Shuama. It's elegant, and it also alludes to your identity." She was so hungry that she couldn't stand it anymore. She didn't want to talk nonsense with him, mainly because she didn't understand. She tiptoed and wanted to bite his hand, but she couldn't bite it, so she settled for the next best thing. He turned his wrist and suddenly pointed at her forehead. "You're so cute. It's not good to just suck blood." A drop of blood from his fingertip fell between her eyebrows. A white light flashed, and the drop of blood formed a cinnabar mole between her eyebrows. It was strange that after the cinnabar mole appeared between her eyebrows, the hunger that had been following her like a shadow disappeared. She also seemed to have gained intelligence. She suddenly learned to think and speak. She tilted her head and looked at him. "Shuama, well, from today onwards, you'll be called Shuama." The man floated up, put away the zither, and put a set of clothes on her. It's not good for a little girl to be naked all the time. She stood on the ground, and for the first time, she didn't feel that wearing clothes was too ugly. She even turned a circle in front of him. He looked down at her. "Do you want to go back to Fantion Palace with me? Or continue to stay here?" She repeated the last sentence. "Continue to stay here." He raised his hand and rubbed her head. "You're right. You're born from heaven and earth, which is quite similar to me. It's better to be free." He led her to a mountain spring. "Drink this when you're thirsty." He also hunted a few game and taught her how to barbecue. "Eat this when you're hungry." She blinked her eyes and learned from him. She learned quite quickly. Only when it came to barbecuing game did she have no talent. When it didn't taste good, she turned around and ran away angrily. After this scene, there were a few more fast-forwarded shots in quick succession. IMO saw that the little girl no longer lived by sucking blood. She began to cultivate in the mountains. She was indeed a demon born from the heavens and earth. She automatically absorbed the essence of the sun and moon. Thirsty to drink mountain spring water, hungry to eat barbecue game. Shinjili came to see her every 10 days or so. He was quite capable. No matter where she hid, as long as he wanted to find her, he would be able to find her. He often brought her clothes and pastries that he made himself. He even taught her how to use the cleansing spell. Of course, he also taught her some life skills. Just like that, 3 years passed, and he suddenly stopped coming. She was already used to him coming over every few days. When he didn't come for a long time, she would be disappointed and feel as if she had been abandoned. But after all, she was a devil born from heaven and earth. Even if he did not come, she would still grow very quickly. Although he wasn't very tall, he was very capable. There were a few monsters in the mountains who were curious about her. Occasionally, they would find an opportunity to bully her, but she beat them until they pissed their pants. Furthermore, she went straight to their cave abode and defeated all the demons in the cave abode. Then, she became the cave master of the cave abode and took in the demons as her underlings. After that, the shots changed faster. Every shot was a history of her battles. After every shot, she had more followers. However, Shun Julie's figure was no longer in these shots. The next time he appeared was on a sunny afternoon. Chapter 1780. At that time, she was sitting lazily in the arms of a handsome big demon. Behind her was a luxuriously decorated cave. Luminous pearls, emeralds, rubies, all kinds of shiny gems were embedded in the cave. Behind her were 4 subordinates who were massaging her shoulders and fanning her. Not far from her, there were also 4 other small demons who were roasting game for her. She was already the boss of this area. All the demons in the mountain area recognized her as the king. She lived a glorious life. Her life was very simple. She cultivated, ate, and beat people up. Whoever bullied her, she would beat them up. Whoever bullied her subordinates, she would beat them up. So as she beat them up, she became the boss of the people being beaten up. Her team was growing bigger and bigger like a rolling snowball. The demons that filled the mountains were all her subordinates. With more subordinates, it was inevitable that things would get messy. At that time, she was illiterate and naturally did not know how to manage things. She only knew how to teach those who disobeyed her a lesson. So as long as these subordinates did not offend her, it was fine. The others formed gangs and ran amok, making the area a mess. She did not know all these until he came. She was dozing off when she suddenly sensed something. She opened her eyes and looked into the sky. The person floating in the sky was an old friend that she had not seen for a long time, Shun Julie. He was still wearing his loose white clothes. His handsome features were more dazzling than the sun behind him. When the female demons in front and behind her saw him, they were all stunned. Those who were roasting forgot to roast, and those who were fanning forgot to fan themselves. His gaze did not look at anyone else, but directly fell on little Shiuma's body. She was indeed young. After 100 years, she still looked like a 4 or 5-year-old child. Her eyelashes were unusually long, her eyes were unusually bright, and her facial features were exquisite like an ink painting. She used a big demon as a pillow and sat in his arms. He lowered his eyes and looked at her expressionlessly. She still recognized him. The moment she saw him, she smiled and showed her little dimples. She opened her little arms and asked for a hug. She liked to be hugged by others. Ever since Shun Julie hugged her in the beginning, she would always open her arms for him to hug whenever he came. He also habitually picked her up and held her in his arms to teach her some knowledge. After this habit was formed, he stopped coming. Therefore, she would find someone else to carry her, such as a great demon by her side. Furthermore, she had to find a great demon that looked pleasing to the eye to carry her. She had let many big demons hug her, but she always felt that no big demon's hug could make her feel more at ease and comfortable than his. Now that she saw him again, she immediately remembered the comfort of his embrace and habitually opened her arms to him. A faint light flashed in his eyes. With a wave of his sleeve, her small body flew up and spun in the air. After the faint white light of the cleansing spell flashed, she fell into his arms. She immediately wrapped her arms around his neck and sniffed his body. She liked the smell of his body. With such a soft and cute child in his arms, his expressionless face showed a hint of helplessness, and the lines on his face finally softened. He touched her arms and legs and said to himself, "Why are you still so young?" She ignored his surprise and was very happy to see him. She pulled his hand and pulled him into her cave. He did not refuse and followed her in. He was almost blinded by the colorful gems in the cave. Chapter 1781. This cave was obviously the nest she was living in now. It could only be described with one word: colorful. All kinds of gemstones were embedded in the walls of the cave. Even her bed was covered with gemstones. She stood proudly on the ground, desperately looking up at him. She tugged at his sleeve, waiting for him to praise her. Shinjuli's lips twitched slightly. Which nouveau riche designed such a dazzling design? He looked down at the little girl beside him who was blinking her big eyes. He felt that he had found a reason why she could not grow up. How could she sleep well if she slept in such a dazzling place every day? If a child could not sleep well, they would not grow up. He looked down at her and rubbed his eyebrows. I think it's time to teach you how to read. He looked at her as if he was looking at a small white poplar that was supposed to grow into a towering tree that was running towards a crooked tree. She opened her arms and wanted him to hug her again, but he shook his head. He felt that he had raised this bad habit of hers. It had to be changed. Since it had to be changed, it had to be done by herself. He taught her that girls should not be hugged by others, especially by men. She was more obedient to him, and she also felt that other people's hugs were not as comfortable as his. He threatened her by saying that if he saw her being hugged by other men again, he would never hug her again. As expected, her bad habit of being hugged by others was cured. She did not let other big demons hug her anymore. Since then, he came more frequently. He still came once every 10 days or so. Every time he came, he would bring a set of books. Of course, every time he came, he would teach her how to read. She was no doubt a genius. She could read very fast and almost never forget. He could teach her hundreds of words a day. A few days later, she would be able to read books on her own. He did not teach her the principles of being a person. He let her understand everything by herself. He was delighted to find that as she became more knowledgeable, the dazzling layout of her house began to change silently. Those colorful gemstones gradually disappeared and were replaced by some interesting furniture. She liked luxury and shiny things, so her house was also close to the luxurious and stylish direction. This was not in line with his character, but he did not force her on this point. Everyone had their own taste. As long as there was taste, as long as there was style, it was fine. With this knowledge, her horizons were broadened. Her daily routine was no longer limited to eating, sleeping, and fighting. She began to try to manage her subordinates. For example, there were various kinds of assignments, such as infeffing subordinates big and small, and letting them perform their own duties. Nothing could be accomplished without rules, so she began to set them up slowly. He even slowly formulated some laws for the demons to abide by, of course. As long as she went out of the law, she would cross the bottom line of some great demons, and there would be an uprising against her. In the process of pacifying the rebellion, she also learned the art of war. Thus, she wrote more and more laws and orders, and they became more and more standardized. This demon region was finally no longer in a mess, and the demons were no longer blindly committing evil. Perhaps it was because she was a natural demon, but although her management methods and wisdom were becoming more and more mature, her growth was extremely slow. After thousands of years, she still looked like a 7 or 8-year-old girl. The little demons who had grown up with her were long gone. Demons were not immortal. Most demons only had slightly longer lifespans than humans. Chapter 1782. Demons were not immortal. Most demons had a lifespan that was only slightly longer than humans, but it was only 400 to 500 years. Of course, demons with high talent and good cultivation could seize the fortune of the sun and the moon, and they could cultivate into an immortal body for thousands of years. But those were rare, and they had all grown up a long time ago. They grew up to be great demons, married and had children, and even became grandmothers and grandfathers. She was the only one who still looked like a baby. She felt a little lonely. She had also asked Shunjuli, who often came to visit her, about this problem. Shunjuli touched her head. Shuama, you are a natural demon. You are different from other demons. It is normal for you to grow slowly. Don't worry. Shuama looked at him with her big round eyes. Is Julie also a natural demon? Did he grow slowly before? Shinjuli's eyes deepened slightly. He touched her head again and did not say anything. He was the opposite of her. He was a natural god and grew very fast. He looked like this when he was born. Shinjuli did not tell her his full name, so she always called him Jolie. It was the first time that a natural demon appeared in this world, so he did not know what the growth pattern of this demon was like. But although this little girl grew slowly, she still grew, didn't she? More than 1,000 years had passed, and she grew from a naked baby to a 4 or 5-year-old child. Maybe in a few thousand years, she would be able to become an adult. Although she was small, she was very intelligent. The demon world was gradually unified by her, and she became the demon king. Although she was a natural demon, her nature was not evil. Plus, Shunjuli, the god, taught her from time to time, so she did not do any big bad things. At that time, the 6 realms were still in chaos. From time to time, there would be wars between the realms, causing a bloody storm. Whoever had the hardest fist and the most ability would be the boss. The realms fought each other for a good territory, and blood flowed like a river. The demon realm couldn't defeat the celestial realm, so they came to the demon realm to take over the territory of the demon realm. They accidentally met Xiuma and recognized her as a natural demon. If a devil wanted to become stronger, devouring its own kind was the fastest way. Therefore, the battle between devils was very fierce. There were several devil kings in the devil world, and the devil kings also fought with each other. One of the demon kings was relatively weak. His territory and underlings were snatched away by others, and he unintentionally escaped to the demon realm. We saw the snow-white and tender little Xiuma. His first thought was to devour her. What he didn't expect was that Xiuma, this little girl, would have such a high level of demonic power. Instead of devouring her, he was beaten black and blue by her. Fortunately, she didn't know how to devour devils to increase her cultivation. Otherwise, this devil king would have died in her hands. Since he was no match for her, the demon king had the idea of tricking her into joining the demon race. He wanted to use her ability to seize territory for himself and restore his former glory. Although this devil king's ability was not great, his eloquence was very good. After a series of eloquent words, he finally persuaded the bored little demon king. She was not interested in becoming the king of the demon realm. What she was most interested in was that this abject devil king told her that the devil king who occupied the largest territory in the demon realm had a strange flower in his hands. This flower had the effect of making people grow. She was worried about her inability to grow, so this news was simply a timely rain for her. Therefore, without saying anything, she abandoned the demon realm on a rainy day and went directly to the demon realm. Chapter 1783. Little Xiuma really lived up to his expectations. Not long after she came here, she took back the territory for the fallen devil king. The other devil kings were naturally dissatisfied and joined forces with other devil kings to suppress her. But her kung fu was not ordinary, and no one in the devil world was her opponent. The result of her crusade was that these demon kings were gradually taken care of by her. She was thinking about that strange flower, but the demon king who owned that strange flower was extremely powerful and had many experts under him. If she were to fight him alone, she would naturally be no match for him. Therefore, she needed to have a force that was on par with her. Therefore, she quietly took care of the other demon kings one by one. When the devil king reacted, the little devil kings in the devil world were almost cleaned up by her, and their little claws were reaching towards him. The biggest war in the history of the devil world was caused by the confrontation between little Xiuma and the powerful devil king. After that war, the powerful devil king died in battle, and his territory and subordinates all belonged to little Xiuma. Little Xiuma became the devil king and was respected as the devil lord, becoming the veritable king of the devil world. These things were easy to say, but not easy to do. From the moment little Xiuma entered the devil world until she unified the devil world and became the devil world's lord, she experienced thousands of years of bloody wind. After she entered the devil world, she never saw Shunjuli again. She didn't know if he didn't find her, or he felt that she was enough to take care of herself, so he didn't look for her anymore. In the dead of night, she still missed his embrace. But the idea of growing up was firmly entrenched in her heart, so she couldn't care about anything else for the time being. She didn't know that the man in white who taught her growing up was a god, and she didn't know that he was actually standing on the opposite side of her. After she unified the devil world, she finally got the strange flower. After eating it happily, she finally grew up in a month as she wished. From a 6 or 7-year-old little girl to a 12 or 13-year-old girl. She happily returned to the demon world, wanting to let Jiu Li see her grown-up appearance. But after returning to the demon world, she remembered a very serious problem. She didn't know Jiu Li's identity and origin, and she didn't know where he lived. He had always been the one looking for her, and she had never been able to find him. She had also asked around in the 6 realms, but no one knew who Jiu Li was. It was as if he had really disappeared. She had waited in the demon realm for 3 years, searching for him for 3 years, but he never came back. He was truly missing from her life. She was now the king of the monster realm and demon realm. She could call the wind and summon the rain in the 6 realms. She was having a good time. The only thing that made her unhappy was that she didn't seem to be growing any longer. Originally, she had grown slowly, but at least she had grown. However, ever since she ate the flower and turned into a 12 or 13-year-old girl, she stopped growing. She didn't notice this problem at first. When she did, it was already another 500 years later. She hadn't grown a single centimeter in the past 500 years. What appeared in the mirror had always been that sweet little lowly. At first, she thought that the environment in the devil world was not good, so she returned to the demon world. She lived in the demon world for another 500 years, but the reality still made her despair. She began to look everywhere for a way to grow up. She used all kinds of strange methods, but there was still no effect. One of her senior subordinates, a former devil king, heard a special prescription from somewhere. He said that the devil lord's growth might be related to the imbalance of yin and yang. Chapter 1784. The Demon King also said that as long as she married someone, she might be able to break the curse of not being able to grow up. Other than the Devil Lord, this Demon King was one of the strongest in both the demon realm and the demon realm in terms of martial arts and fame. He said that because he wanted the Demon Lord to marry him. He also hinted to the Demon Lord that she should marry the strongest cultivator. The stronger the cultivator, the easier it would be for her to grow up. What he didn't expect was that although the Demon Lord believed his prescription, she didn't want to marry him. She was thinking about the man who helped her, but that man never appeared in her life again. She couldn't find him at all, so she turned her attention to the strongest cultivator in the 6 realms. At that time, she was already very famous in the 6 realms. Even the celestial realm didn't dare to offend her. At that time, it was rumored that the most powerful cultivator in the 6 realms was the supreme god of the 36 layers of heaven. She thought that the supreme god might be good, but she didn't know if he was old or ugly because the supreme god almost never appeared in the world. Even when he occasionally appeared in the 6 realms, he always wore a white jade mask. No one knew if the person behind the mask was ugly or not. Until one time, when she went to a flower appreciation party in the celestial realm, she happened to see the supreme god walking out of a door accompanied by the celestial emperor. At that moment, she felt like she was struck by lightning. At that moment, she was overjoyed. Although he was wearing a mask, although the powerful divine aura around him caused everyone present to lower their heads and not dare to breathe, she still recognized him. Julie. So he was the supreme god. She was the demon lord. Since she came to the celestial palace, the celestial emperor had to give her face. Therefore, the celestial emperor walked to her and bowed to greet her. Her eyes fell on the supreme god, standing not far away. The supreme divinity was also looking at her. She couldn't see his expression under the mask, only his deep blue eyes that were as deep as a lake. When he looked at her, his eyes were calm. She couldn't tell if he recognized her or not. Xuema was no longer the ignorant child who was born more than 2,000 years ago. Although she was still fierce, she wasn't reckless. She curled her eyelashes and greeted him. Divine Lord, long time no see. The supreme divinity nodded faintly at her, then turned and left. She was still a little disappointed. To be honest, she still missed his embrace. But he didn't seem to recognize her anymore. It didn't matter. It would be the same even if she made him get to know her again. Therefore, she sent someone to propose to the Pantheon Palace of the 36th heaven. These things were all jumping scenes in Ammo's dreams. In her dream, she knew that this was her past life, the past life that belonged to the devil lord Immo. Therefore, she stood in the void obediently as a spectator and concluded from time to time. In fact, she had always wanted to know what happened to her 50,000 years ago. She didn't expect that she would be able to dream about it on the first day she came to Pantheon Palace. Although these dreams were a little messy, and sometimes they were even scattered all over the place, it was a good thing that she had a strong mind that was good at summarizing. She was actually able to organize these fragmented dreams in an orderly manner. The last dream was exceptionally clear. Gioli was playing chess alone on a cliff when she suddenly appeared in front of his chessboard. "Divine Lord, have you made up your mind?" He didn't even raise his head. "Consider what?" Chapter 1785. You didn't receive my marriage proposal? She raised her eyebrows and sat down across from him. "I did. It's not bad to use as a piece of paper," he answered casually. "You?" She looked like she was about to get angry, but then she smiled and said, "It's okay. A gentleman is like jade, and a beauty is easy to find. It's okay if you're a little reserved. I won't give up." She sounded like a playboy who was flirting with a good girl in public. She was full of the spirit of an indomitable spirit to marry a beauty. "Huh." He put the chess piece in his hand on the chessboard and looked up at her, who was a head shorter than him. "You're quite brave." She picked up a black chess piece. She was small but high-spirited. "I've always been brave. There's nothing I can't get when I want to do something." Giuli looked indifferent. "Am I the thing you want?" She spun the chess piece on her fingertips and smiled like a blooming flower. "It's a slip of the tongue. You're the person I want. Why don't you consider my condition carefully? I'm very good-looking, and I'm good at martial arts. I'm also a good match for you. Why are you dissatisfied with me? Why do you have to choose me?" Giuli put down a white chess piece. "You're the strongest man in the world. When I, the Devil Lord, choose a son-in-law, I naturally have to find someone of equal social status who is worthy of me." She answered confidently. She didn't know why her words angered him. His face turned cold. "I'm not interested in you. You can leave." "Hey, what do you want to do to make you agree? Give me a straight answer." She was a little impatient. He no longer paid any attention to her and continued to play chess. A crimson light flashed, and she slashed her sword at him on the chessboard. He lowered his head and seemed to have eyes. He waved his sleeve and wrapped it around her sword. He waved it again, and she took a few steps back. He didn't say anything. He packed up the chessboard and turned to leave. She didn't give up and jumped in front of him to stop him. "What's wrong with me?" She was in such a hurry to stop him that she almost fell into his arms. She hurriedly took a few steps back. She realized that she was too short and needed to look up at him. Suddenly, she felt that she wasn't imposing enough. She jumped onto a rock next to her and barely reached the same height as him so that she could look into his eyes. Giuli didn't say anything. He just looked at the big rock under her feet and then looked at her again. The corner of his mouth slightly hooked up. Although he didn't say anything, the meaning was obvious. He seemed to dislike her for being short. Her small face blushed slightly, but she still raised her head to look at him. "Although I'm a little short, as long as we get married, I will grow up." Giuli had wanted to leave, but he stopped when he heard her words. "Can you grow up after getting married? Who told you that? You're in a hurry to get married because of this rumor?" His tone was really not good. She seemed to feel that she had let it slip, so she rubbed her eyebrows in annoyance. "You don't have to care who told me that. Just tell me, do you agree or not? If you agree, I won't let you suffer too much. I'll bring a large dowry. I heard that you're looking for the Mirage Pearl to make chess pieces. I have collected a set. If you agree to be my husband, I can give it to you as a betrothal gift. Oh no, as a dowry. I don't need to live in your Pantheon Palace. We only need to sleep together once a month. You can do whatever you want at other times. You can even take concubines." Chapter 1786. She gave him her conditions, which were unprecedentedly generous. She was the type who understood the principles of the world. The more Shun Julie listened, the angrier he became. When she was done, she waited for him to give her an opinion. Shun Julie only said, "In your dreams." Then, he left without looking back. She chased after him. "Hey, Julie, why don't you give me any conditions? If you think we need to sleep together too many times after we get married, we can change it to once every 2 months. But we have to persist for a longer period of time, 6 years." He suddenly turned around and walked directly in front of her. She was caught off guard and fell in his arms. Her forehead hit his chest, which made her a little dizzy. When she was about to take another step back, her waist was suddenly hugged by him. The pleasant smell that she had been longing for filled her nose again, and her 2 arms automatically wrapped around his neck. This was an action that she had often done when she was a child, and this time, she was exceptionally proficient in it. He didn't push her away this time. Instead, he raised his hand and lifted her chin. His breath was dangerous. He was very close to her. "Do you know what sleeping together is?" She blinked and looked at him. "Doesn't sleeping together mean a man and a woman sleeping together? You see, my body is so small, I can't take up many beds. Also, I only sleep one night every 2 months. Even if you're not used to it, you won't be tired. You won't lose out if you become my husband." She didn't know why, but she felt that his breath was a little dangerous this time. It made her heart beat inexplicably. When Shun Julie heard her words, his expression was not as cold as before. He looked at her in his arms. Although she had grown up a lot, she still looked like a child. Although she had become the Devil Master, she was still very naive in some aspects. He had no intention of marrying anyone, including her. Moreover, the reason she gave was so ridiculous. He put her down and took a step back. He said indifferently, "I won't marry you. Don't waste your energy." He turned around and left. She proposed so sincerely, but was still rejected by him. Xiuema's stubborn temper rose. She shouted behind him, "Shun Julie, I won't give up on you. If I say I want it, then you must get it." This man was too stingy. She was only going to sleep with him once every 2 months, and she had even given him such generous conditions. Yet, he kept rejecting her. She wasn't happy at all. The more he acted like this, the more she wanted to conquer him. Shinjili did not look back. Naturally, he did not take her threat to heart. In the blink of an eye, he was far away. Ning Xiuma, who was watching all this in her dream, couldn't help but rub her eyebrows. Her EQ was so low in her previous life. To chase a man like Shun Julie using such a simple and crude method, it would be strange if she could catch up with him. In the void, she looked at herself standing there with her fists clenched. She couldn't help but want to go up and teach her a lesson. But as soon as she took a step forward, the scenery changed. The palace walls were made of green jade, and the lofty buildings within the gates were faintly discernible. The words Fantion Palace were faintly discernible above the gates. Xiuma, who looked like a lowly, was sitting in front of the palace gates. There were bouquets of fresh flowers in front of and behind her. She was lying on the white jade bed in the midst of the flowers. She supported her head with one hand and flipped through a book with the other. She looked quite comfortable. Obviously, she was preparing for a long battle here. She couldn't enter Fantion Palace, so she simply made a bed in front of the gate and waited for that person to appear. Chapter 1787. Fresh flowers couldn't be kept fresh, and the bouquets began to wither in less than a day. The petals fluttered around her body, creating a beautiful scene. She sneezed, rubbed her nose, and said to herself, "It's been a month, and he's been cooped up in the palace all this time. Isn't he afraid that he'll grow hair?" She felt a little itchy on her body, so she raised her hand to scratch it. Just as she scratched twice, she suddenly seemed to sense something. She looked up and saw Shun Julie flying over from a distance. In the blink of an eye, he landed in front of her Fantion Palace. She was stunned for a moment, then cursed in a low voice, "Damn spy." Obviously, her spy's information was wrong. Shun Julie wasn't in the palace, but had gone out a long time ago. As a result, she had been waiting here like a dumb goose for a month, changing flowers every day for a month. She heard that Shun Julie would always go out in the morning, so she would prepare a bouquet of flowers every morning. Now that it was already night, the flowers had already withered. But now that she finally met him, she didn't want to give up. So after being stunned for a moment, she picked up a bouquet of flowers and jumped in front of him. Shunjuli. She was short, and the bouquet was the largest. With such a hug, she was almost drowned in the bouquet, and no one could find her. In order to pursue Shunjuli, she had spent a lot of money and asked many demons for advice. But most of the demons' courtship was very direct. Basically, both sides would directly roll in the grass nest if they liked each other. If one side didn't like the other, then the other side would use force. If he won, he would directly carry the beauty home. If he lost, he would be beaten by the beauty and never dare to think about it again. These tricks were obviously useless against Shunjuli, so someone found some books for her in the human world. These books were really good stuff. There were many ways to pursue a beauty in them, and one of them was to send flowers. It was said that beauties liked flowers, and it was best to send a bouquet a day. Generally, sending flowers for 10 days to half a month would move the beauty and win her heart. She felt that this method was good, so she implemented it first. She was a devil master, so if she wanted to send flowers, she would naturally send the largest bouquet to show her sincerity. Therefore, every bouquet of flowers she made was so huge that it could drown her. She looked up at him through the gaps of the flowers, only to see him frowning slightly. He quietly bypassed her and raised his hand to open the enchantment of Fantion Palace. It wasn't easy for her to see him, so she naturally wasn't willing to be ignored. She turned around and handed the huge bouquet to him. "This is for you." Shunjuli's lips twitched. It had always been men who chased after women and gave them flowers. Why was it the other way around when it came to him? What did this little thing take him for? He raised his hand and pushed aside the huge bouquet in front of him. He said indifferently, "I don't care." The flowers were already a little withered, and when he plucked them, half of the petals fell off and landed on the face of the little girl behind the bouquet. Shuama brushed the petals off her face. She wasn't discouraged. According to the story, she had to do it at least a dozen times. She had just given him a serious gift, so it was expected that he wouldn't be moved. She showed a little face that was more energetic than the flowers and said heroically, "What kind of flowers do you like? I'll pick them for you." "I don't care about any flowers, so you don't have to waste your time." Shunjuli bypassed her again. However, she pulled his sleeve. "Julie, haven't you always liked me? Why don't you agree?" Chapter 1788. Shunjuli stopped in his tracks and looked down at her little hand that was grabbing his sleeve. "Let go." His voice was extremely cold. If she was an ordinary immortal or devil, she might have let go of his hand after hearing his voice. However, Shuamal would not. She was not scared. Her little hand held his sleeve even tighter. "Julie, you gave me a reason. I feel that you like me. You even liked to hug me back then." Shunjuli looked down at her. "Does it mean that I like you because I like to hug you? Devil Master, are you thinking too much?" Just as he said this, his sleeve shook and a furry little head popped out. Its sharp little mouth almost touched Shuama's hand. Shuama was stunned for a moment and let go of her hand. She could see that it was a snow-white little fox with fluffy white fur. It was extremely beautiful. The little fox looked delicate and delicate. After it came out, it climbed onto Shunjuli's arm. Then, with a faint white flash, it turned into a pink little doll. The little doll looked like she was 3 or 4 years old. She had a delicate little face. Shunjuli raised his hand and hugged her. The little doll wrapped her arms around his neck. Then, she turned around and looked at Shuama with a pair of round eyes. Shuama was still holding the half-withered flower in her hand. She looked at the little doll in shock and was speechless. The little doll's posture in Shunjuli's arms was exactly the same as when she was young. They were both full of possessiveness. Shuama's heart suddenly hurt. Although she did not know why it hurt, she knew that it was very painful. She looked at the little doll and then looked at Shunjuli. Shunjuli looked indifferent. "I picked her up in the mountains. She's not bad, right? I have always liked small and soft children. I always want to hug her when I see her." The subtext was that he liked to hug her and educate her because of this reason. He treated her no differently than he treated the little fox doll. Shuama pursed her lips. She's not as pretty as I was when I was young. I was the prettiest when I was young. As soon as she said this, the little fox doll immediately bared its fangs at her, revealing a pair of small canines. Her teeth are not as pretty as my tiger teeth. Shuama immediately attacked the fox doll again. She didn't like to see him carrying other children. It felt like her belongings were being taken away by someone else. Shun Julie probably didn't expect that she would notice this. The corners of his eyes twitched, and he said indifferently, "Different flowers enter different eyes. I like her now." Shuama's self-esteem suffered another blow. She pursed her lips even tighter. She paused for a moment before discussing with him. "So you like girls this small? Actually, I can also become as small as her." She was afraid that he wouldn't believe her, so she simply turned around. As expected, her body shrank by half, and she became as small as 3 or 4 years old. Just like when he saw her before, she looked up at him with a pair of big round eyes. "Look, I'm still prettier than her." She was the cutest and most beautiful when she was young. When they walked in the mountains, even the fiercest gorillas wanted to hug her. It could be said that she was the killer of all creatures. Shun Julie looked at the little lowly demon master on the ground and felt the veins on his forehead throbbing. Before he could speak, Shuama spoke again. "I remember that you like me like this. You would hug me every time. After we get married, I can share a room with you like this. Share a room with him like this?" That scene was too wretched. Shun Julie refused to imagine it. Chapter 1789. Ning Xiuma, who was hiding in the void as a bystander, had the urge to buy a piece of tofu and slap it to death in her previous life. At that time, she was so stupid that she was cute, but also so brave that she was cute. When one's martial arts were too strong, one's brain would often be too lazy to think. In her previous life, Xiuma was born to be a strong martial artist. She would beat those who disobeyed her until they became obedient. No one could go against her. Therefore, it was not easy for her to see the dark side. She was also straightforward in her actions. For example, this time, she had set her sights on Shun Julie. She would chase him to the end. The method she used was so straightforward that one could not look at it directly. Ning Xiuma could not help but blush. Her gaze fell on Shun Julie again. She could clearly understand that she was dreaming and remembered everything that happened before she fell asleep. She could no longer see him in reality. It was not bad to see him in her dream. Although he could not see her in her dream and would not communicate with her, she felt that it was a gift from the heavens to be able to see him again. Zhuang Xingxiao was a butterfly in a dream. Who could differentiate between the dream and the real world? The Almighty in the real world had completely left her. That reality was too cruel. She did not want to return to reality for the time being. She looked at the Almighty below. Although she knew that it was an illusion in her dream, she still looked at him greedily. She even flew down to his side and stretched out her arms to hug him. However, she hugged empty air. Her arms swept past his body. In the end, she could not have any physical contact with him. The little fox doll in Shun Julie's arms suddenly sneezed. She raised her small hand and rubbed her nose. "Itchy." Her voice was soft and tender. Shun Julie looked at the almost bald bouquet in front of him. After Xiuma became smaller, she was not willing to throw away the bouquet. Now, she was completely covered by the flowers. Your flowers made her uncomfortable, Shun Julie said coldly. Ah, little Xiuma did not react. With a wave of his sleeve, the bouquet of flowers flew straight into the air and disappeared without a trace. It was unknown which trash space he had thrown it into. You, little Xiuma, clenched her fists. It wasn't easy for her to get these flowers. Shun Julie no longer looked at her. He bypassed her and directly opened the enchantment of Fantion Palace. He didn't even look back at her. The palace gates slowly closed in front of little Xiuma. Little Xiuma didn't follow him in. Without Shun Julie's permission, no one could enter his palace. Xiuma had tried before, but failed every time. Little Xiuma stared at the closed palace door with her eyes wide open. Her small fists clenched and unclenched then clenched and unclenched. She looked like she would jump up and smash the door at any moment. After a while, she seemed to have thought of something. Her whole body was like a deflated balloon. She hung her head and returned to her bed in front of the door. She sat there and hugged her knees. After a while, she pursed her lips and muttered, "So I'm not the only child he raised. He didn't come to see me for a long time. He probably went to raise other children." Her voice was a little disappointed. She turned over and lay down on the white jade bed. However, she felt something. When she touched it, she found that it was a purple-red bottle. There was a medicinal liquid gently swaying in the bottle. Where did this come from? She turned the bottle over and over to examine it. The bottle seemed to be made of glass, and she could see her little face reflected on it. When she saw her little face, she was shocked. Chapter 1790. There seemed to be a layer of red bumps on her face. She couldn't believe it. She took out a mirror and looked at it. She saw a baby's face covered with red bumps. God, no wonder he looked at her strangely. She had bumps on her face. She was so ugly. Of course, she was not as good-looking as the little fox in his arms. She even boasted that she was pretty. Ning Xiaomo looked at her little face in the void and knew that she was allergic to pollen. The small medicine bottle must have been thrown to her by Shan Jiuli. The pills inside should be anti-allergy medicine. However, Xiaomo didn't know that at that time. She kept touching her little face and cast spells on it from time to time. Obviously, spells couldn't fool her. So, more and more bumps appeared on her little face. In the end, her hands, neck, and even her body were covered with bumps. She couldn't help but scratch, but the more she scratched, the more she scratched. This was probably the first time she had experienced such a situation. She was a little flustered and took out all the medicine she had on her. However, these medicines were all golden source salves, antidotes, or medicines to enhance magic power and physical strength. None of them were suitable for the illness. She fumbled around with the medicine bottles and accidentally knocked the medicine bottle that had once hit her, causing it to shatter with a loud bang. Xiaomo seemed to have just noticed the medicine bottle. When she turned around, she found that the medicine had spilled all over the floor. She couldn't put it away. She was so itchy that she couldn't help but change her body back to her appearance when she was 12 or 13 years old. She wanted to see if it would be lighter if she changed back to her original appearance. However, after she changed back to her original appearance, the itch got worse. It was the first time she knew that itch could be so deadly. She randomly swallowed a few antidotes and endured for a while. Suddenly, she jumped on the bed. It was itchy. It was so itchy. Now, her eyelids were covered with bumps. She didn't know where to scratch. So, she rolled around on the bed and scratched. She didn't know that her bed was also stained with that kind of pollen. As she rolled around, more and more pollen stained her body, and her allergy became more and more serious. Ning Xiaomo, who was hovering in the air, felt anxious for her for no reason. However, she couldn't say anything to remind her to quickly get away from that bed. Perhaps because it was too itchy, tears seeped out from the corners of her eyes. Her body was also covered in bloody marks from her scratches. Her little mouth couldn't help but let out a rather painful groan. She was about to throw caution to the wind. She grabbed the medicine bottles next to her and poured all the medicine into her mouth. Someone suddenly grabbed her wrist. The medicine bottle in her hand was snatched away. She was so itchy that she almost lost her mind. She whimpered and began to struggle. She felt as if she had fallen into someone's embrace. Following that, her entire body felt cold, as if she had been thoroughly cleansed by some cold water. That coolness caused the itchiness to subside a little, and also brought her back to her senses a little. Just when she was about to open her eyes to take a look, her little mouth was pried open. A cold and slightly bitter medicine was poured into her mouth. She swallowed subconsciously. Her throat was so itchy that it almost broke. Now, when the medicine slid down her throat, she felt a cooling sensation, and the itchiness subsided. However, other parts of her body were still itchy. Even her eyeballs were itchy. She couldn't help but want to scratch them. Her hands were caught, and even her feet that were kicking and scratching her legs were restrained. She could no longer move. Chapter 1791. Bear with it. It will be over soon. She heard a cold voice. She could not bear it any longer. She was so itchy that she wanted to go crazy. His hands and feet were shackled, and he desperately struggled. Unconsciously, he used his magic power in an attempt to break free from the shackles. Her body was on fire for a while, and then countless knives appeared in the next moment. She used all kinds of methods to save herself. Her kung fu was not weak, and she used all kinds of moves when she was in a desperate state. It seemed that it caused a lot of trouble for the person who restrained her. In the end, the man suddenly pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. "Be good. Don't move." That embrace was warm and comforting, strangely calming her emotions that were about to explode. Her body stiffened, and she wanted to open her eyes to take a look. However, her eyelids were completely swollen. She could not even open her big eyes. Nevertheless, she was familiar with this embrace. Her chaotic mind seemed to have reacted a little. She opened her mouth. "Julie?" The hands holding her tightened slightly, and his breath was slightly heavy. "Bear with it. It won't itch anymore after a while." Subconsciously, she listened to him. Although she still felt unbearably itchy, she really endured it and did not move. Time ticked by. Because she had taken the right medicine, the itchiness on her body gradually disappeared. Her tense muscles gradually relaxed, and her swollen eyes were finally able to see something. What entered her vision was a snow-white robe and the beautiful curve of the other party's Adam's apple. Everything was so familiar. She often saw this scene when he hugged her many years ago. Now that she saw it again, Shuama felt warm in her heart. She stared at his Adam's apple. She wanted to kiss it when she saw it, but now she wanted to do it even more. She was a person of action. Once she thought of it, she would do it immediately. She suddenly raised her head, and her mouth touched his Adam's apple. Then she rubbed it hard. Because she was still itching, she could not control her lips well, and saliva flowed out. She kissed his neck with her saliva. He suddenly froze and waved his arms. As a result, Shuma, who was lying comfortably in his embrace, was sent flying into the air. She reacted quickly. When her body was in the air, she flipped over and landed on the ground. "Julie, you like me?" She smiled. If it were not for her swollen eyelids, her eyes would have been sparkling. Julie was speechless. He calmly cast a cleansing spell on himself to get rid of the saliva on his neck. Then he calmly looked at the excited Julie and said, "Devil Master, you are overthinking. I just don't want you to embarrass yourself in front of my palace." "You don't mean what you say," Shuma interrupted him. "I heard that the supreme divinity is usually so cold-blooded that you wouldn't even care if someone died in front of you. Now, I only tickled you, and you couldn't bear it." She did her best to prove herself. In the void, Ning Xiuma, who had been watching everything from Xiuma's perspective, could not help but touch her forehead. Ning Xiuma could only comment on her courtship in her previous life. Her courage was praiseworthy, but her EQ was worrisome. Julie's eyes finally fell on Xiuma. She could not tell if he was happy or angry. "Devil Lord, have you always been so narcissistic?" Chapter 1792. So ugly. She's so ugly. The little snow fox at his feet jumped up and down and spoke in human language. Xiuma did not say anything and shot out a ray of light. "Smelly fox, shut up. You're the ugly one. You have fur all over your body." She moved too quickly, and Julie probably did not expect her to lower herself to the level of a little fox. He was unable to block it in time, and the ray of light hit the little fox. The little fox screamed and rolled a few times on the ground. It stood up dizzily and sat down on the ground again. Several tufts of fur fell off its body one after another. Its originally smooth, satin-like fur was now bald here and there. It looked very ugly. The little fox cried out and threw itself at the Supreme God's feet. "Supreme God, woo-woo." Xiuma was still proud. "You're uglier than me right now. You're still too young to fight with me for a man." Bang! A loud sound interrupted Xiuma's words. Xiuma turned around and found that her jade couch had been smashed to pieces by Shun Jiuli. The booklets that were placed at the corner of the couch flew up and scattered in the air. A few pages fell in front of Shun Jiuli. His eyes were sharp and he saw a line of words. Chasing a male pet at all costs. Chasing a male pet. She thought of him as a male pet. Shun Jiuli was such a calm person, but his face was faintly ashen at this moment. He waved his sleeve in disgust, and the booklets scattered on the ground burned and turned into ashes. Shun Jiuli's voice was colder than the winter wind. Scram for this deity. With a wave of his sleeve, the broken pieces of the jade couch whizzed towards Xiuma's face. Along with the broken pieces, his ice-cold voice sounded. If I see you pestering me here again, I will kill you. Scram. With Xiuma's martial arts, these fragments naturally could not hit her. She waved her sleeve, and the fragments disappeared in the air. However, Shun Jiuli returned to the palace as soon as she was done talking to him. She was the only one left standing in front of the huge palace gates. Her body had a good foundation. After taking the right medicine, the allergic symptoms had almost disappeared, and her body was no longer itchy. She stared at the palace door in a daze, not understanding why he was suddenly so angry. Wasn't he treating her? He clearly cared about her, didn't he? Why must he reject her? She stood there for a moment, but she still couldn't figure it out. She wanted to sit down and think about it, so she casually condensed another bed. However, she didn't expect that the bed would automatically split into 4 halves as soon as it was placed on the bluestone floor. It seemed that Shun Jiuli had cast some kind of spell here to prevent her from setting up camp here. She pursed her lips and suddenly thought of something. She took out a mirror and looked at herself. She couldn't help but scream. Reflected in the mirror was a face covered in bloody scars. Streaks and streaks of blood were scattered all over the place. It was a ghastly sight. Needless to say, she had scratched herself when she couldn't bear the itch. She had spent so much on scratching herself. No wonder he looked at her with such disgust. Even she herself was shocked by his distressed expression. She pursed her lips and looked at herself in the mirror. Then, she raised her head and looked at the closed palace gate. Finally, she turned around and flew away. Ning Xiuma had always been looking at everything from the perspective of little Xiuma. Once she left, she naturally followed. However, at the moment when she left, she looked back at the palace gate. Chapter 1793. Shun Jiuli had adopted a little fox. Would this little fox be the fuse that would trigger the great war between the celestial beings and the devil race? Xiuma would be reincarnated as Shui Mo in the future. She would be reincarnated as a 9-tailed snow fox. Was it related to this? Mother, mother! There seemed to be a call from the distant sky, and there was a hint of panic in the voice. Little Nianma. Ning Xiuma was shocked and immediately woke up. She opened her eyes and saw Shin Nianma's anxious little face. When he saw that she had opened her eyes, Shin Nianma burst into tears and directly rushed into her arms. Mother, you scared me to death. A somewhat gloomy and cold side chamber with a simple big bed. These are the scenes that she saw before she fell asleep. There was no little fox, and there was no Shun Jiuli. Everything that happened just now was just a dream from her previous life. Ning Xiuma was a little stunned. She subconsciously held little Nianma in her arms tightly. Nianma, what happened? She just fell asleep. Why was the little guy so frightened? Mother, why did you come here to sleep? You didn't wake up just now. I thought mother. Shin Nianma's body trembled in her arms. Apparently, he was really frightened. His father was gone. If even his mother could not wake up from her sleep, little Nianma did not know who else he could rely on. Ning Xiuma's eyes were slightly sore. She held the child in her arms tightly. Mother just fell asleep. It's okay. But mother didn't even breathe just now. I thought of many ways to wake you up, but I couldn't. Shin Nianma's voice was still a little choked. His voice was obviously hoarse. It seemed that little Nianma had used all kinds of methods to wake her up. He almost shouted until his voice was hoarse. Ning Xiuma's eyes moved. There was no breath. Was it not a simple dream? She didn't know what was wrong with her, but she couldn't be bothered to think about it. Right now, she had to comfort her son. She was just about to hold her son in her arms to comfort him, but she didn't expect that the little fellow had already left her embrace on his own accord. He placed his small hand on her wrist to feel her pulse, closed his eyes, and carefully sensed for a moment. Then, as if he was relieved, he said, "Mother's pulse is normal now. It's not like before, when I couldn't feel her pulse, he couldn't wake her up. There was no heartbeat, no pulse. There was an 80% chance that his soul had left his body. To be able to have an out-of-body experience just by sleeping, he was indeed capable. Mother, there is a sense of evil in this room. Don't sleep here. Why don't you sleep in my father's chamber?" Shin Yima always felt that the side chamber was a little creepy. "It's okay, baby." Ning Shuama naturally did not want to leave this place. Regardless of whether she was sleeping or having an out-of-body experience, as long as she could dream of her previous life and see him again, that was good enough. It turned out that he looked like this 50,000 years ago. This person had not changed much. Unlike herself, who had reincarnated 3 times and became 3 people, Shuama, Shuimo, and Ning Shuama. Among these 3 lives, Ning Shuama's life left the deepest impression on her. Little Nyenma also came to this world because of Ning Shuama's life. Therefore, she still felt that Ning Shuama's short life was her real life. She also lived a passionate and unrestrained life. She didn't really understand Shuama's life, but in both Shui Mo's and Ning Shuama's lives, she received Shun Julie's love. Chapter 1794. In her first life, Shun Julie actually liked her, didn't he? Otherwise, with Shun Julie's temperament, he wouldn't care even if she was itching to death in front of his palace, not to mention holding her in his arms to treat her. However, it was hard to say whether this liking was love or not. After all, in her previous life, Shuama was raised by him. It was more like he was raising a daughter. His feelings for her should be more like father-daughter love. The little girl that he raised suddenly vowed to marry him for a reason that made people speechless. Any man would not be able to accept it, not to mention Shun Julie, who was an iceberg man who had not been moved for thousands of years. Therefore, it was normal for Shuama to kick an iron plate when she proposed to him. However, she didn't know what happened between the two of them that caused the outbreak of the great war of gods and demons, which caused the whole world to be reshuffled. When Ning Shuama first entered the side chamber, she wanted to make a nest for her to sleep in. She didn't look carefully at the other decorations in the side chamber. At this moment, when she sat up on the bed, she carefully sensed the atmosphere in the room. It was indeed not quite right. It felt a little cold. She walked around the room a few times and found a dusty box on a beam. Her heart skipped a beat, and she took it down. The box was not big and looked very old. It was made of the kind of immortal Phoebe Jinan wood. There was no lock on the box, only a hidden buckle. Ning Shuama looked around the box and could see that it had existed for a long time. Maybe it was an old item from 50,000 years ago. There should be a layer of psychokinesis on the outside, so even the black iron buckle on the box was shining. This thing should be Shun Julie's private collection. Should she open it? She hesitated for a moment and heard a sound. She looked down and saw that the box had popped open automatically, revealing the things inside. Ning Shuama was stunned. The things inside were a little messy. There were 2 bouquets of withered flowers, a huge ruby ring, a ruby brooch, and a red post at the bottom. Ning Shuama opened the red post and read it carefully. Her heart skipped a beat. There was a line of words written in flamboyant calligraphy. "We gods and devils love each other, and that is to eliminate evil for the people." Although the handwriting was not neat, it was very imposing. Ning Shuama seemed to see the heroic spirit of the demon lord, who was fearless in this world, when he wrote these 2 lines of words. This must be the proposal post. Unexpectedly, Shun Julie didn't use this post as a paper to ignite the fire. Instead, he carefully kept it. Her gaze fell on the flower, the ring, and the brooch. These things should have been given to him by her in her previous life, right? It was similar to his taste and style in his previous life. She sat there for a long time, lost in thought. Shinyama was also looking at the few things. He was young, but his taste was not bad. He was very much like his father, so his comments were very accurate. The surface of the ring is a little rough, and the pin of the brooch is too sharp. The ruby on it does not match. This handwriting doesn't look very cultured. It exudes a sharp edge and lacks meaning. Damn, this little thing criticized the things from her previous life as worthless. Ning Xiaomon knocked on Shinyama's head. What do you know? This handwriting looks very imposing. Shinyama pouted. Nianma's handwriting is better than this. Well, then I will test your homework later. Okay. Shinyama's eyes sparkled. The two of them talked for a while and finally dispersed the gloomy atmosphere in the hall. Chapter 1795. Mother, is father really in isolation? Shinyama finally asked the question that he had always wanted to ask. Yes. Her forced laughter was like a balloon. Her son's casual words were like a needle to her. Even a slight prick could cause her to break into pieces. The pain seemed to spread at any time and was about to drown her. She struggled to smile and got up. Let's go, Nianma. Let me see how your homework is. Missing someone was like a weed. With a little stimulation, it would spread like a disaster. It made people want to get drunk to relieve their worries. They also wanted to sleep to numb themselves and coax themselves. However, Ning Xiaomon could not do these things because she still had a son. She did not have the capital to indulge her sadness. All the pain was suppressed in her heart. She tried to make herself busy and numb herself with being busy. However, when she was free, she would be lost in her thoughts for a long time. At this moment, she was looking at the books on the bookshelf. Almost all the books were written by Shan Jili himself. She casually opened a book and saw his concise and free handwriting. There were old and new books. The new ones were obviously prepared for Shen Yanma, because the content was completely based on his physical characteristics. As for the old books, they were neatly placed. There were Buddhist scriptures, poison scriptures, medical scriptures. There were all kinds of books. A person who had lived for too long and had too much kung fu could not help but feel a little bored. Therefore, Shunjili learned a variety of things. His interests often changed. When he reached the peak of skill, he would write a summary and throw it aside. These books were his summary. Shin Yinma was reciting the books, so Ning Xiaomon sat there and read casually. With her current state of mind, she could not read anything. However, it was good to be able to read his handwriting here. She remembered that when she was watching You from the Star, after the male lead left, the female lead missed him very much. She desperately tried to find those who knew the male lead and asked them to talk about the male lead. She listened to it over and over again and cried over and over again. At that time, she was puzzled. Since he was gone, what was the use of listening to those trivial things? Now, she finally understood that feeling. In fact, she also wanted to hear more about Shun Jili from other people. Just like earlier, she tried to tease Shin Yinma by telling him about the things that happened between him and her father. Listening to it once wasn't enough. He wanted to listen to it a second time. Even though it was not a funny thing, she could still laugh out loud. She laughed so hard that tears almost flowed out. It was as if she was suffering from hysteria. Until Shun Jili was almost suspicious, she forced herself to stop. She pretended that nothing had happened and sat by the bookshelf to read the books written by Shun Jili. The sun was shining brightly outside, and the bright rays of light shone into the room, casting silhouettes on the people inside. It was such a beautiful afternoon, and the sun was so bright. If he was still here, his heart felt like it was being torn apart. She clenched the book in her hand and bent down slightly, waiting for the pain to pass. Inadvertently, he caught a glimpse of a book in the corner of the bookcase. It looked a little special, as if it was often taken down to read. What kind of book was it that Shun Jili often took down to read? She curiously walked over and raised her hand to take the book. However, she felt that something was not right. It was not a book, but a mechanism. After all, she used to be a secret agent, so she was very familiar with the mechanism. She held the book and turned it slightly. Suddenly, the bookshelf slowly moved to both sides, revealing a passage. Chapter 1796. She was stunned for a moment. Shun Julie actually made a secret room in his study room. What was this secret room for? When Shun Julie was still alive, all his important things were kept in his storage space. No matter how confidential the documents or things were, he only needed to throw them into his storage space. No one could find them, and he did not have to worry about losing them or being found out. Now, he suddenly made such a secret room. Obviously, he had a premonition that he would immortalize. There were some things that he did not want to let people see, but he was reluctant to destroy. Therefore, the existence of this secret room was born. So, what was it that he was reluctant to destroy? Her heart was beating fast. She had a vague feeling that the things inside might be related to her. She looked back at Shun Yinma, but he was reading. He was focused on nothing and did not even look in her direction. She paused for a moment and walked in by herself. The passage was not long. After turning a corner, there was a door in front of her. Ning Shuima's face was slightly pale. She recognized this door. It was the door of the side hall where she lived on Tianyin Peak. When she entered the Devil Kingdom, Shun Julie ordered to expel her from his own house. He also ordered the demolition of the side hall where she lived. She did not expect that the door of the side hall would appear here. She reached out and slowly pushed the door open. Then, she stood at the door and held her breath. It was a bridal room. No, it was a bridal room. The bed was red with morning glow, the table and chairs were red, and the quilt was red with the word she. The whole room was a warm red. It was a festive red. Even the luminous pearl hanging above her head was pink. Obviously, this was the bridal room of a newlywed. It was a very luxurious bridal room. The style of the bridal room was the style that she used to like. Even the layout was faintly familiar. Ning Shuima felt a little weak in her legs. She slowly walked in. Her hands fell on the red bed, and her eyes fell on the quilt. Even if these things were burned to ashes, she would still recognize them. This was the only time when he and she were intimate, and he casually arranged it. At that time, she thought that those things were just illusions that he casually made. She did not expect that these things were real, and now they were here. The past was like smoke floating in her heart. That time, she had said in a fit of pique that she wanted to consummate her marriage with someone else. In the end, his wolf nature had been driven out. He had casually arranged a bridal chamber and carried her in. That was the first and only time he had made love with her. At that time, she was lying on the bed with him. She tried to push him away, but ended up with him. That was how Nianma was born. However, after that intimacy, she woke up in the side hall of the heavenly sound peak. Everything at that time, including him, had disappeared without a trace. She waited bitterly for him for 10 days, only to be met with a series of nightmares. This memory was both beautiful and cruel to her, because just a moment ago, he had brought her to heaven, and not long after, he had personally sent her to hell. She thought that the wedding room was just a bubble, but it turned out that the things inside were real. It seemed that he had already prepared it in the storage space. He had actually prepared this in his storage space. Perhaps he really had the intention of marrying her back then and wanted to give her a surprise? Shun Julie was no longer there. Ning Shuima could no longer ask what his thoughts were at that time. She just held the quilt and stood in front of the bed for a moment. She got on the bed and shook the quilt. Her heart was suffocating as if she was drowning. Chapter 1797. She just held the gauze curtain in a daze. After standing in front of the bed for a moment, she got on the bed and shook off the quilt. Her heart felt as if it was drowning. There were 2 wooden figures in the quilt, a man and a woman. Their facial features, figures, and clothes were all vivid and lifelike. It was exactly her and his appearance. The carving could only be described as a work of art. The woman's face was smiling, and there was a shallow dimple on both cheeks. Her small mouth was slightly pursed, and her eyes were curved into crescents. Her long eyelashes were curled up, lifelike. It was not just lifelike. Her expression and movements, from the big body to the small eyelashes, there was not a single flaw. It was simply a miniature version of Ning Shuima. It was as if this wooden carving could come to life with just a breath of air. The man's appearance was Shun Julie, but the clothes on his body had changed. It was no longer his usual white clothes. Instead, it was red like the woman's. The style of the red robe was not that of an ordinary bridegroom. It was his usual style of dressing. There were flowing patterns on the red robe, faintly in the shape of twin lotus flowers. This should be the wedding dress he designed for himself, right? The lines were smooth. It was obviously a wooden carving, but it gave people a feeling of the clothes being blown by the wind. The two wooden carvings were lying side by side. The man's hand was holding the woman's hand in the bridal room. The pair of wooden carvings in the red wedding dress were lying side by side in the wedding quilt. Ning Xuan only felt that her eyes were hot, and her nose was also sour. There was no need to ask. These two wooden carvings were the work of Shun Jiuli. Only by carving a person into the heart and bone marrow could one carve such an image without having to look at the person. It turned out that Ning Xuema still had some doubts about Shun Jiuli. There were too many misunderstandings between them. Although she had asked him about those things at the last moment, and he had answered her, she had chosen to believe him. However, there was always a layer of gauze in the depths of her heart. Now, those remaining dust-like doubts had finally completely disappeared. He loved her. He had always loved her. He loved her to the bone. He loved her to the point of no return. That was why he suffered so much. He actually wanted to marry her, didn't he? Actually, he really wanted to hold her hand and enter the bridal chamber, right? In Shui Imo's life, although he had also married her, that wedding was more like a joke. He knew that she came here with ulterior motives and forced him to marry her for an unspeakable purpose. She did not marry him willingly, and he was just going with the flow. That wedding was extremely simple. It was just a ceremony, and he didn't even wear a groom's robe. In Ning Xuema's current life, he and she were truly in love and even had a child together. However, due to some mishap, he didn't even give her a formal engagement. They owed each other a real wedding, a wedding where they held hands. When he set up all of this, he must have known that they would never have the chance to fulfill their marriage agreement. So he set this up here, a bridal chamber that she truly liked. He finally put on a real wedding robe and entered the bridal chamber hand in hand with her. What was his mood when he set up all this? What was his mood when he was sculpting the newlyweds? Ning Xuema didn't dare to think about it. She also didn't want to think too deeply. She tightly held the two wooden carvings, her fingertips turning white. Shun Jiuli, I don't want this illusion. Shun Jiuli, I want you to hold my hand and marry me with your own hands. Chapter 1798. Shun Jiuli, since you love me so much, why didn't you let me die with you in the land of purple evil? Why did you have to bear everything alone? If you love me so much, how could you bear to leave me and Yinma alone in this world? Shun Jiuli, we have agreed on 1,000 years. After 1,000 years, you have to come back. I will wait for you to come back and marry me. I will wait for you. You can't break your promise anymore. You said that a promise is worth a lot of money. You have never broken your promise to others. What about me? What about me, who loves you so much? I won't break my promise, right? So you have to come back. No matter what you do, you have to come back. If you break this promise, I will look for you. I will look for you at all costs. Ning Xuema sat on the bed. Her heart seemed to be blocked by a cotton ball. It was painful and swollen at the same time. She almost could not breathe. Bursts of hot water rushed to her eyes. Tears seemed to come again, but she held them back. Don't cry. Ning Xuema, don't cry. If you want to cry, you have to wait for him to come back. You have to cry in front of him. Don't cry now. She stood up and walked around the room again. She found many old things that she had used before. They were all placed in the side hall of Tianyin Peak. She thought that these things were gone, but it turned out that they were all kept in his storage space and were now placed here. Her gaze fell on a wardrobe in the corner of the room. It was also the wardrobe that she used to use. Could be the old clothes that she used to wear. She walked over and opened it. Then, she stared at the clothes in a daze. There were indeed a few pieces of her old clothes, but more of them were new clothes. There were all kinds of rare materials. Many of them were not even from the Tianxi continent or the celestial devil continent. She picked up a random piece and measured it on her body. It was exactly her size. She would find it too fat if she added a little more, and she would find it too skinny if she lost a little more. It seemed that these clothes were bought for her when he was traveling in the Six Realms. However, he could not give them away. She still remembered that he once told her that during the 10 years when she was missing, he had repeatedly traveled through different spaces and subconsciously tried to find her. Needless to say, these clothes were obtained by him at that time. No wonder her clothes were torn after she was injured in the Purple Evil Land, but he could easily take out a new set for her to change into. It seemed that he was prepared. How much did one have to love someone to be able to buy new clothes for her in a hopeless situation? What was his mood when he bought these clothes? She caressed the fabric and closed her eyes slightly. Shinjuli, I like all the clothes you bought. I think they will look good on me. I want you to come back and wear them for me to show you. So you built the secret room to store these things. You knew that you were nearing the end of your life, so you began to treat me coldly. You thought that as long as I didn't recover my memories, I wouldn't care even if you died, right? You didn't expect that I would recover my memory in Zisha's place, so you deliberately said those harsh words to make me continue to despair about you. It was only when I was injured that you finally couldn't control your emotions and treated me well. That's why all your actions were so abnormal, wasn't it? You and I loved each other so much, but there were very few times when we were really happy. There were also very few times when we were really honest with each other. All your contradictory actions were just because you didn't want me to be sad for you. You even wanted to seal my memory again and let me forget you completely. Chapter 1799. You probably thought that by sealing my memory, I would not live in your Fanteon Palace, and the secret of your secret chamber would never be discovered by me. However, Shun Julie, if I really forget you, won't you be sad? Shun Julie, when you die, do you really not want me to be with you? She gripped the male wooden sculpture tightly and pressed her lips against the wooden sculpture's lips. She closed her eyes slightly and suppressed the sweet and fishy feeling in her chest. The room was full of his scent. Obviously, after he sent Nianma away, he spent the rest of his life here. It was a person's wedding hall, a person's thoughts, and a person's determination. Ning Shuamo wandered around the room, pacing back and forth. She found a thick stack of paintings. Every painting was of her. She was smiling, crying, angry, shy. All kinds of postures, all kinds of expressions. Every painting was vivid and lifelike, and the characters in every painting seemed to be able to walk out of it. She looked at the paintings one by one, unaware of the passage of time and the passage of time. When her heart ached to the extreme, she felt numb. Her fingers carefully touched the paintings as if she was copying the posture of the person when he was painting. It was as if the person was still standing in front of the table and painting. Shuama. She seemed to hear a soft sigh in her ear. The voice was so familiar. She stiffly turned around and seemed to vaguely see him standing by the bed. He was wearing his usual wide white robe, and his face was as cold as before. His pair of deep blue eyes were staring at her, his gaze deep and serene. She was stiff in the same place. Her lips trembled for a moment before she called out, "Great Master!" Was it an illusion? It must be an illusion. She wanted to rush over and throw herself into his arms, but she did not dare to. She could only walk over step by step and reach out with her trembling hands. Sure enough, the person in front of her disappeared. Only a sigh could be heard. Shuama, take care. It was indeed an illusion. She slowly sat down by the bed and only felt that all the strength in her body had been drained. She sat there and did not want to move. When she was so sad, she could not cry. She didn't know how long she had been sitting there, lost in thought. Suddenly, she seemed to have sensed something. She looked up and saw Shun Nianma standing at the entrance. She did not know how long he had been standing there, but his face was slightly pale. Ning Shuama's heart sank. She quickly stood up and called out, "Nianma." Shun Nianma's big eyes slowly turned and finally fell on Ning Shuama's face. He opened his mouth and asked, "Mother, Father will never come back, right?" He was a sensitive child. In fact, he had this suspicion long ago, but he didn't dare to think about it or verify it. Although he asked, he still hoped to get a negative answer from his mother. He missed his father. He couldn't imagine what would happen if his father never came back. His eyes were wide open, and there was a trace of vulnerability and fear in his eyes. Ning Xiuma's heart skipped a beat. She took a deep breath and walked over. Don't think too much. Your father will come back. It will take some time. Nianma, you have to be patient. She raised her hand and wanted to carry the child, but little Nianma turned and ran away. I have to go to school. Father has left a lot of books for Nianma. Perhaps he will come back after Nianma has finished reading all the books. Ning Xiuma's outstretched hand stopped in midair. She could only stare blankly as her child ran away. Her heart was in extreme pain. Chapter 1800. She closed her eyes slightly and suddenly understood why Shan Julie wanted to erase her memory at the last moment. This kind of pain was the most unbearable. This kind of lovesickness was the most painful. This kind of pain was endless. He wanted to erase her memory because he did not want her to suffer anymore. He did not want her to experience this kind of pain. However, no matter how painful it was, it belonged to her. She had escaped once, and she did not want to escape a second time. She would rather be sober and let the lovesickness gnaw at her heart than live in a muddled state. Shun Julie, if you don't want us to suffer anymore, come back. Ning Xiuma had always been a person who did not like to wait passively. Shun Julie's death had many mysteries that could not be solved. For example, he did not give up on her before. After he regained his identity and returned to the Fanteon Palace, he suddenly gave up. For example, he had never been able to predict his own fate. This time, it seemed that he had already predicted it. All the arrangements were extraordinarily comprehensive. For example, he should have recovered his memory from 50,000 years ago in the Fanteon Palace. Could his death this time be related to the things that happened 50,000 years ago? For example, the flowers that he gave her were certainly not purely for the sake of pursuing her. Perhaps there were many hidden reasons. For example, in the sealed place, Shun Julie knew that she had recovered her memory. He knew that she still had feelings for him. He should know that if he died, how sad she would be, and how sad Nianma would be. He did not want her and Nianma to be sad. If it was not a last resort, he would not choose this path. What was his last resort? If it was only to seal Zisha, he could have told her all the important things. With her current kung fu, it was not impossible for them to work together. Perhaps both of them did not have to die to seal Zisha properly. Therefore, there should be other reasons. There must be a reason why he had to die. What she needed to do now was to find out the reason. Then, she would find a way to make him come back. During the night, Ning Xiuma was worried that the child would be lonely, so she wanted to sleep with him. However, little Nianma shook his head vigorously. Father said that I am a man, and a man should be responsible and independent early so that I can take care of my mother and the people I care about. Therefore, I want to sleep by myself. If Father sees that I am so obedient, perhaps he will come back earlier. He was so sensible that it made one's heart ache. Ning Xiuma was speechless. Shun Jili did a good job in educating the child. He had really made all the arrangements for the child's funeral. She walked towards the side hall, but Shin Yima stopped her and looked at her eagerly. Mother, can you stay in Father's chamber? He has always missed you. If he knew that you were willing to stay in his palace, he might have come back earlier. Ning Xiuma felt sad, but she forced a smile. Okay, I will listen to Nianma. She finally entered his bedroom and slept on his bed. The blanket was filled with his scent, and she felt as if he was hugging her as she laid on it. Her heart meridians had almost recovered, and after resting for another night, she would go to Mother Earth to ask about the origin and use of those flowers. She thought that she would have a dream again, a dream about her previous life, a dream about the Devil Master Xiuma. She didn't expect that after she slept. She didn't even have half a dream. She slept until dawn. Perhaps it was because she was sleeping on his bed. She felt a cold wind blowing when she was half awake. She seemed to see him sitting beside her and looking down at her. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.